Music that talks to your soul on Channel Africa.
Thought you all about me. Plenty missed calls, you forgot about me. I took a risk to follow my dreams. When I'm in the mini one, I'm feeling like Bean. I swear, you can have a baby by me. I've been trapping since 2014. You don't have to choose sides, play for my team. You don't want to tell me kilo twella codeine. That's why, hell feel a down, go twar. Kilo problematic, I'm the young Dwayne Card. Started off in the trap, now we in the cars. Hell lit, difficult, they get low fast. I'm a twag, I'm just gonna keep it one hand. And richer than me, when I want more hand. We can turn him to a leg though, if you want. Before you pop the crystal, Tomaga Savan. Kahobala 5 pop, Tamaga di ham. Manorega fenti, unana giri han. Tulega oregisa, hena montan. Right, that skull fake, but my circular, I swear. You can never baby by me. I've been trapping since 2014. You don't have to choose sides, play for my team. You don't want to tell me kilo dollar codeine.
Only you got something special there. It's just you and me together and forever, yeah. Monyana wanga fisha, sefatla khosaka khosanta kwisha, yeah. Only you got something special, yeah. And if you down, yeah, just call me down, yeah. It don't matter to me, I'll be right there. Say, if you down, yeah, just call me down, yeah. It don't matter to me, I'll be right there, yeah.
I keep an angel around me. I can yagi POP, it's hard up on beat. I got real love for you, I see speed. Wow, but I'm a masala, got no speed, I swear. What you heard about me? When I call you out the line, Twaga got need. I was really selling dope, Zanga got sniff. If a dime residue, Pumula Mamin, damn, you could be the mother of my kids. I remember closing eyes, first time we kiss. You know where I'm from, you can blink and get killed. One false moon, God, it can get real. Mutwag, heaven lunch, sonta. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you, Naguelonyak. Toxic, petene, cause you take a mark. Reciprocate, it's a regalo for taskies. I know everything is all about me. All about lean and all about weed. Hurts when you tell me kilo, what about me? James St. Pass, you forgot about me. I swear, you can never baby by me. I've been trapping since 2014. You don't have to choose sides, play for my team. You don't want to tell me kilo dollar codeine.
Only you got something special there. It's just you and me together and forever, yeah. Monyana wanga fisha, sefatla khosaka khosanta kwisha, yeah. Only you got something special, yeah.
Music that talks to your soul on Channel Africa. Channel Africa, we think differently. The African perspective.
It's 6 o'clock Central African time. A very good morning to you and welcome to Rise and Shine. This is Channel Africa. From an African perspective, we broadcast you news happening in and around our continent. And thank you so much for starting this new week with us and this new day. It is Monday, the 18th of August. My name is Asanda, Beda.
Good morning, Asanda, Beda.
Good morning.
Did you have a good weekend?
I had a great weekend.
Very green.
And I know you also had a great weekend.
Very green today. Is this environmental or you just love the color?
Apparently green is my color.
Oh.
So I've just stuck to that.
I think I'm
They say
blue.
it's my color.
I think I'm blue. I'm not sure. But anyway, good morning, everybody. Welcome. It's the start of a brand new week here on Channel Africa. And we've got lots planned for you on the program. We'll give you more details as the program unfolds. But there was a SADC meeting that took place over the weekend in Madagascar. Yeah, they take over the SADC chairship. We'll be unpacking that. And also over the weekend, the South African National Convention.
Team.
No, were you thinking rugby? National Convention, because we'd been talking about it all weekend.
Yeah.
It actually happened. So we're going to be unpacking that as well. So a lot of things to discuss, including the rugby, I'm sure will be in the sport with Fikile Dingwati. But we begin with your news with Jwalane Tulongwepe.
SABC News. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has commended the Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan on her role that she played as the SADC chairperson on politics, defense and security. Amongst other missions, she let Suluhu Hassan presided over the negotiations that discussed the security crisis in the eastern DRC. Addressing the closing ceremony of the SADC heads of state and government in Madagascar, President Ramaphosa said some missions were difficult, but Suluhu Hassan showed leadership. The matter of the burial of former Zambian President Edgar Lungu is back in the Pretoria High Court this morning after it stood down on Friday. The Lungu family is in court for leave to appeal the full judgment, which ruled that the Zambian government is entitled to repatriate the former president's body to his home country. On Friday, the Lungu family and the Zambian government informed the court that they would be discussing the matter in an attempt to resolve the dispute over the final resting place. Sibahle Mota has the details.
The Pretoria High Court will hear if the Lungu family and the Zambian government have come to an agreement following a dispute over his burial. If both parties have not reached an agreement, then the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria is expected to proceed with the Lungu family's application for leave to appeal the entire full court judgment to the Supreme Court of Appeal. This after the Pretoria High Court ruled that the Zambian government could repatriate the late former president's body to his home country for a state funeral. Proceedings are expected to begin at 10 a.m.
More than 30 undocumented foreign nationals have been arrested along with 800 people in Soweto in the south of Johannesburg. South Africa. At the weekend, the police led Operation Chanela swooped on wanted suspects of crimes related to gender-based violence and drugs, illegal foreign migrants, and several owners of illegal shebeens. A prominent Sudanese human rights group has accused the country's army and security forces of torturing people to death and operating execution chambers. The emergency lawyers group said it had documented hundreds of arrests in the capital Khartoum. It said that in the worst cases, some captives had later been found dead with evidence of torture. The Sudanese army recaptured the city of the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, in March, against which it is fighting a bitter civil war that has has killed tens of thousands in 2 years. The fighting has sparked one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. 12 million people have been forced from their homes, and famine has been declared in parts of the country. And finally, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia must stop with the killings before there's a peace deal. A host of European leaders said they'll join Zelensky in Washington today for his meeting with President Donald Trump. Zelensky participated in a virtual meeting of leaders alongside the European Commission head. Zelensky says Ukraine must be involved in any peace talks with Moscow and Washington. For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulongwebe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, furious Rassie Erasmus hints at a change in plans for the second test against Australia. Morocco beat DR Congo to secure quarterfinal spot as Kenya top Group A in Chan. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
So every morning before after this, goodness gracious, it's going to be a long week, Asanda, I'm telling you. Yeah, so every morning after the 6 o'clock news, we bring you what we call the Africa Roundup. And what it is we take a look at the stories that played out in the last 24 hours, and we bring them to you in a concise form so that we can catch you up very quickly and set you up with the news day ahead. And we begin with this news. Botswana's President Duma Boko, along with Mozambique's President Daniel Chapo, Mauritius Prime Minister Ramogalan, called for a rethink of regional and international trade engagements. And they were speaking at the first summit since taking office. They urged action beyond words and stress African solutions to African problems.
I also appreciate the second edition to that worthy cohort of women presidents on the African continent, in particular our region, SADC region, as I warmly recognize the President of the Republic of Namibia. And thank the Namibian people for giving us this leader. I hope and trust that she brings a feminine touch, a touch of compassion and deep care to a region facing pressing, persistent, and trenchant challenges.
Following their remarks, Namibia's President Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah called on SADC leaders to tackle hunger, youth unemployment, and other socio-economic challenges to ensure regional development plans succeed.
We must unite with urgency and compassion to ensure that food security is not just a goal on paper, but must be a reality in every home across our region. We must empower our youth to compete with their peers worldwide, particularly in the creative industry, science and technology, and innovation.
South Africa's High Court sitting in Pretoria in South Africa is expected to hear today the application by former President Edgar Lungu's family for leave to appeal a judgment ordering the repatriation of his remains to Zambia. The case involves the Zambian government, which is seeking a state funeral for Lungu in Zambia, and his family who want a private burial. The hearing comes after a joint request to adjourn from Friday to today made by lawyers representing both parties. Tembeka Ncukaitobi and Ben Sloop stood up for the Zambian government and legal representatives of the Lungu family.
Talking to each other about how to resolve the matter. If the discussion succeeds, the court will be informed, but we need more time than today. And we have agreed with my learned friend to ask the court for an indulgence to stand down the leave to appeal to Monday the 18th at 10 o'clock. I've discussed with my colleagues. We also agreed that the matter to stand down to Monday at 10 o'clock, and we're still optimistic that the finality that would be in the interest of all the parties would be reached. Stands down to Monday, 10 o'clock. Thank you. Court adjourns.
The Palestine Solidarity Campaign, along with The Palestine Solidarity Campaign, along with other organizations, held a march along Cape Town's Sea Point Promenade, that's here in South Africa, on Sunday. The demonstration drew attention to the killing of journalists working for international broadcaster Al Jazeera while reporting in Gaza, among other concerns. Usuf Chikte from Palestine Solidarity Campaign has more.
Israel is writing the worst history in humankind with the killing and the genocide of what is taking place there. But that's one part of the story. They're also killing the truth. They're also killing the message, and they're also killing the messengers. What they've done of last week is to kill Anas al-Sharif, who stayed in a makeshift tent outside Al-Shifa Hospital, bombed several times. But it's not only the bombing. They've killed a journalist and 5 others, and they're trying to do this as they've done this as they are invading Gaza and occupying Gaza militarily yet again. And they want to cover up, and they don't want this to be exposed, this genocide to be exposed. And so they think by killing the messengers, by killing the journalists, the story won't be told.
Right, let's take a look at this story. The African Union has backed a campaign to replace the Mercator map, which shrinks Africa with a projection that shows that the continent's true size. AU Deputy Chair Semla Malika Hadadai said that the map fuels false perceptions, whilst the correct map campaign promotes the 2018 Equal Earth projection.
The campaign, led by advocacy groups Africa No Filter and Speak Up Africa, is urging organizations to adopt the 2018 Equal Earth projection, which tries to reflect the country's true sizes.
There are alternatives to the Mercator projection.
Farah Njai, the co-founder of Speak Up Africa, says the Mercator map affects Africans' identity and pride.
There is a very tangible link between the map and perception, because undermining and showing a reduced continent and a smaller continent very much undermines also that false perception of importance and power on the global stage.
The 16th century map distorts continent sizes, enlarging areas near the poles, such as North America and Greenland, while shrinking Africa and South America.
That's how we come to the end of this Monday's edition of the Africa Roundup. We'll do this again tomorrow. Coming up on Rise and Shine, we delve deeper into some of the stories that made headlines over the past weekend and get a throw forward to what we can expect to develop in the new week as Peter, my colleague, gets in conversation with our resident analyst, Mighty Jamie.
Stella Longwe. Pamalonje.
Palitu soko mapano pamalonje. Kumvera nyimbo za mu Africa, kusangalala, kupeza moyo. Akuti kumva moyo kuti kuyenda bwino. Pano pamalonje. Ndiyetu apa tili ndikatswiri oyimba ameneyu ndikatswiri wa dziko la Malawi amene akukhala mdziko la South Africa, ndipo amayimba amene akuti ndi Big Nick Malawi. Yatusati kuti kodi moyo wanu woyimba ukuyenda bwanji mu Johannesburg?
Moyo woyimba ukuyenda bwinobwino kwambiri, chiliyonse chikutheka ndithu bwinobwino.
Hayi azioneka chiliyonse chikutheka mofa magrasi anu apa mwaka. Akuti kumenya yonse azioneka zoti azikutheka ndithu mu Johannesburg.
Malonje pa nthawi ya 6 koloko kufikira 7 koloko madzulo. Lowiruka ndi Stella Longwe.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
Right, now this is the segment of the show that I look forward to each Monday, and it's called the Roundup Wrap, and we chat to our resident analyst Mighty Jamie, and he talks to us about some of the stories that we highlighted in the news, but what played out in the week that was, and if we have time we often look at the week ahead as well. And we start with South Africa's first national convention, which concluded in Pretoria on Saturday, setting the stage for what will be a national dialogue. Let's find out from Mighty Jamie what he thought of it. Mighty Jamie, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the program. I hope you had a good week.
Morning to you, Peter. Morning to the viewers, the listeners. Yes, I did have a good weekend. I hope you had one too. So you want me to jump straight into the South African topic?
Absolutely.
So, thinking about the moment of the national dialogue, this is something that was foreshadowed by South African President Cyril Ramaphosa in 2024 and seems to have been part of the agreement with the Democratic Alliance as they were signing the statement of intent that there needs to be this national dialogue. It's an idea which has been circulating in South Africa for a period of time, because there's this idea that a social compact or a renegotiation of the the different obligations, rights, responsibilities, social tensions will actually rejuvenate and redirect the South African economy. The only challenge that exists is that there have been so many similar social compact discussions, and there is a frustration and an agitation and almost even a rejection of another process wherein there are talks. So when President Cyril Ramaphosa came into power, he announced gender summits, he announced summits on jobs. And this followed from various other lehotlas and talk shops that have been hosted by the African National Congress over the years. So from the public side, there is a little bit of fatigue, a little bit of not anxiety, but almost dissatisfaction with the whole process. Now, evaluating this particular national convention and how it unfolded, unfortunately for the presidency of South Africa, as well as those who are supporting this initiative, there's been some drama, controversy, and also loss of credibility as a result of the withdrawal of various foundations of prominent South Africans who have provided leadership, the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, the Sisulu Foundation, the Biko Foundation. All of these withdrawals undercut the credibility of the launch in and of itself. And on the day of the launch, we saw, of course, that there were some skirmishes that broke out on the stage, Peter. So all of those things taken together, plus the controversy around the costing of this particular initiative, has been such that while the president hopes that by next year, when they get this rolling, it will be something that can facilitate, a restructuring of South African societal relationships at the very least, it's unlikely to achieve that outcome because of all of the dramas surrounding it and also where the political moment is right now. Something that Cyril Ramaphosa has always thought of himself as being great at: negotiations, dialogue, facilitation, through CODESA, the negotiation of the constitution in and of itself, maybe even when he was NUM chairperson. But this particular time, it looks as if this may not be the answer. And while he's attempting to do it for his legacy, it may not have the results that he's hoping for, Peter.
Does a national dialogue at this time come almost as an admission by the ANC, because it's been governing the country since democracy came into being? Is it them inadvertently saying we failed?
In a way, it is. It is an admission of defeat, and it is an admission almost that they don't have anything in the short to medium term to provide for the population, because we saw the latest unemployment data indicated that unemployment had ticked up a little bit. We also saw from the GDP data that actually the growth is actually stagnant at this particular moment. So if President Cyril Ramaphosa had done this in 2018, Peter, if he had had these conversations at the beginning of his tenure, it would have made sense for them to happen then, and he would have had credibility and authority, and even some kind of mechanism to lead to people to believe that something is going to happen. Having them this late, going towards a major election in 2026, which is the local government elections, and the next election where the ANC may very well lose all power, considering that they've been at this for 31 years, I think it is an admission that, look, we don't know what we're doing in terms of how to solve the problems the communities are facing. But that is us looking at it at its best. The reality is, it is an admission of guilt, an admission of failure as a result of all of the corruption, the mismanagement that has been happening over the decades, which has led to, losses of money and all of this money trickling into the wrong places. These are the outcomes, Peter.
Okay, let's go to the DRC now, where the DRC has rejected Kenya's appointment of a consul general in the eastern city of Goma, describing it as inappropriate. Why would Nairobi want a presence in such a contested city? And why is Kinshasa, do you think, pushing back so hard on this issue?
Well, let's start with Kinshasa. I think it's very clear to me why the Democratic Republic of Congo would say that they're displeased with this particular move, because the move attempts to create credibility, it attempts to provide legitimacy, and almost to support a secession type of move by the people who are living in that part of the DRC. And as a result of that, if I'm the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo, I'm not going to encourage or facilitate or clap hands for any move which attempts to create normalization, regularization, legitimization of places like Goma as standalone governments and entities. So in and of itself, I think the DRC is justified for their response, Peter. When it comes now to the Kenyan motive, it's unclear to me why Ruto would be pursuing this particular direction, unless maybe he has been asked to do that by the Americans as a test case to see whether or not this will hold, because we already know that the Rwandan government is willing to recognize, the eastern parts of the DRC as standalone. But the question then becomes, what of the rest of the world? This could be a test case, or it could simply be that, Kenya requires the mineral resources in that part of the DRC, and they are only able to do that if they put somebody on the ground who can negotiate, who can begin to create the diplomatic relationships that they may need to actually, have relationships, economic relationships with the Eastern DRC. But also it may be just a pragmatic recognition that DRC is going the direction of how Libya basically is operating as two separate countries right now, and people are negotiating with two centers of power, buying oil from the legitimate government, but also from the illegitimate government, and that could be the reasoning. But this in and of itself indicates that the conflict that everyone has said is over is clearly not over, and things are still happening after the signings, all of the signings that we've seen, which were ceremonial and very high profile. On the ground, the material conditions are not shifting, Peter.
Still with the DRC, Qatar says that it's drafted a peace agreement between the DRC government and M23 rebels. But the 18 August deadline, which is today, still no deal in play. I wonder if this delay or this slowness to get something to happen tells us a lot about the complexity of the negotiations, or that it's just another sad chapter in that there's lots of talk but hardly ever anything gets done.
Deal or no deal. This is what we would call this show if it was a show, Peter, because we keep finding out that whatever we thought was done is not done. And I think we had a conversation earlier in the year when all of these things were being announced as being done, and finally we have a deal. We asked the question, this has been so ongoing. There's been this peace process, that peace process. Now, even we saw a few weeks ago the African nations saying they are merging the peace process even after a deal was signed. I think this just shows that the Americans and the Qataris are now beginning to recognize that this thing is not as simple as they thought it was. It wasn't just a matter of bringing in two prominent people, get them to take photos, and then you think that the deal is done or that peace has been achieved in that region. So it does speak to the complexities. And if you recall, some of the issues which were being raised by Paul Kagame around the plight of Tutsis, the history there, if you think about the questions around integration into the army, the questions around recognitions of certain people's rights, all of these things make this a complicated conversation. And then you add the mineral resources and the geopolitical tensions between America and China. China already has large mining operations across DRC. Then you add the African leader factor. This was never a simple conflict. And now I think we are getting to understand more and more that the conflict is still going on. And in as much as the reporting on it has subsided, or the coverage of some of the elements have subsided, it seems as if everything on the ground is still moving towards a direction where the M23 are trying to consolidate control of, the Eastern DRC, where the tensions between Rwanda and DRC have not yet abated. And I think we are beginning to see now more and more that, yes, it is complex. Yes, it is very disappointing that the DRC continues to be on one side, one of the richest, if not the richest, mineral resource country in Africa, but on the other side, the poorest, because of these continued conflicts, these continued disputes. And also we can see clearly this issue is bigger than even what the Americans and the Qataris thought they could do. Although we already knew that, look, they don't have some of the ground vision and experience and expertise to be able to pull off what they thought they could pull off. It was always ambitious to think that it could be done from outside Africa. Now the question then becomes, will the second process be more effective? We'll have to see, Peter.
Okay, SADC met over the weekend in Madagascar. I think it's the first time the summit has taken place there. They take over the chairship. Another one of those gatherings, and so much going on in SADC. Should we still be paying attention to these meetings? Do the SADC citizens feel like SADC as a grouping is actually doing anything for them? Did anything come out of this meeting in your view?
Peter, I'm so despondent, and I'm one of the people who actually would answer the question and say we shouldn't care as much as we do. Obviously, we have an obligation to report and talk about how there's a change in leadership and all of these things. But really, for ordinary Africans living in the SADC region, these meetings have no bearing on their lived realities. There's been so many elections, protests, issues playing out economically and socially within the SADC region. I mean, right now you are seeing tensions between some activist movements in South Africa, tensions between them and the Zambians and other groupings, but nothing is coming of it. So having considered that, you see the lack of involvement by SADC and the lack of action, even when there are electoral disputes, it really renders it as a body that doesn't really seem to help ordinary civilians. But if you are an institutional player, if you are a bank, if you are an electricity or mining company, the regional integration and some of the policies that they've pushed for have been quite helpful. But I don't really expect much going forward. I don't think anybody else should really. It's one of those entities, Peter, that I think has lost relevance to ordinary people.
And in 30 seconds, I know that you studied law. Has the Lungu family appeal got a chance?
I don't think so, to be quite honest. And I don't think that the Constitutional Court would want to normalize this type of a request. So I doubt that they'll have prospects of success, but we'll have to wait and see what is argued.
Mighty Jamie, always good talking to you. Thanks so much indeed. Have an awesome week ahead, and we'll chat next Monday.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you to all the listeners, wishing them as well a good week ahead.
That's one of our resident analysts, Mighty Jamie there, unpacking some of the big stories that played out in the week that was. Coming back to the very present day and the very present moment with your news headlines, here's Jwalane Tulongwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines, the matter of the burial of former Zambian President Edgar Lungu is back in the Pretoria High Court in South Africa this morning after it stood down on Friday. More than 30 undocumented foreign nationals have been arrested, along with 800 people in Soweto in the south of Johannesburg in South Africa at the weekend. And finally, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia must stop with the killings before there's a peace deal. I will have details on these and other stories at 7 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, let's find out what's happening in the world of sports as we get our first full bulletin on this Monday on Rise and Shine with Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
In our sport this hour, we begin with football news. Morocco sealed a 3-1 victory over DR Congo to clinch the place in the quarterfinals of the CHAN 2024, while Kenya topped Group A after defeating Zambia. Heading into the final group stage matches, the stakes were high. Morocco only needed a draw to progress, while DR Congo required a win to stay alive. The Atlas Lions struck first in the 8th minute through Osama Lamloui, who finished from close range after a cross by Yassem Belmari. Although a fourth goal was disallowed by VAR, DR Congo could not recover, ending their campaign in disappointment. On to rugby news. A bad loss is a bad way. That's how Springbok coach Rassie Erasmus summed up South Africa's shocking rugby championship defeat against a resurgent Australia at Ellis Park in Johannesburg on Saturday. The four-time world champions squandered a 22-0 lead on to lose the series opener 38-22. After the match, Erasmus admitted that coach Joe Schmidt's charges outplayed his team in all departments.
Well, we as coaches got it terribly wrong, and we have to look first at ourselves before we point fingers at the players. And we know from now till next Saturday we're going to take a lot of flack, but when we take the credit when we're doing well, and then I always take the flack when we're doing badly, and I'm not saying it with a smile because I'm happy. I'm saying with a smile because that's the reality of rugby, and we're very disappointed, and we are feeling bad for our supporters, and we're feeling bad for our players, and overall for what we produced there in the field.
Erasmus admitted that coach Josh Schmidt's charges outplayed them in all departments, and the Wallabies, they did silence the critics and the box supporters.
22-0 up, you might even lose a test match, but not by 20 points. So it's very concerning, and it's something we have to fix. We lost a few lineouts with sometimes just bad throws, sometimes timing, sometimes the wrong call, and we had 3 weeks to prepare for the game. So I can sit here and give excuses, but I must point the finger straight at me, because I really thought we were well prepared for this game.
Now, tennis news. The world's top tennis players will be at each other again, this time in the final of the Cincinnati Open. Top seed and defending champion Jannik Sinner ended French qualifier Terence Atmane's dream run with a 7-6, 6-2 victory to advance to the final. And second seed Carlos Alcaraz defeated German third seed Alexander Zverev. That's a set up and showdown with Sinner, a repeat of the French Open and Wimbledon finals. Playing on his 24th birthday, Sinner delivered an impressive performance against Atmane. Then Alcaraz broke to open the second set, but gave it right back in game, during which he served 4 doubles faults to Zverev. Now the final is tonight. If they clinch that final, we'll see if Alcaraz can do it again. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fide Lungwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Parlez-vous couramment le français? Êtes-vous passionné par la radio? Et êtes-vous qualifié pour travailler en Afrique du Sud? Envoyez-nous votre CV et vos 3 minutes démo en MP3 à @channelafrica.co.za pour avoir une chance de rejoindre la famille Channel Africa. Si vous n'avez pas de réponse après 14 jours, cela signifie que vous n'avez pas été retenu. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
All right, let's catch you up and find out what's happening in the world of business. And with that, we have Nosipho Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. In your business news this hour, the Democratic Alliance Party wants South Africa's Minister of Tourism, Patricia de Lille, to urgently account to Parliament following the precautionary suspension of South African Tourism CEO, Nombulelo Giliwe. The party says that de Lille's decision of attacking the board's decision will scapegoat Giliwe. De Lille says, according to legal advice, only the chairperson of the board can call a board meeting, and SA Tourism currently has no board chairperson. The DA's Hasina Ismail.
Instead of focusing on the serious allegations against the CEO, the minister is fixated on whether the board had the authority to suspend her without a chairperson, a distraction that risks letting the CEO off the hook. However, it cannot be that the minister attacks the board while giving no attention to the serious allegations against the CEO.
De Lille spokesperson Aldrin St-Pierre says the minister believes the board's resolution was unlawful.
The minister has written to the board members to get their reasons why they believe the board should not be dissolved. The submissions have now been received and the minister is currently looking at those. The minister will also be convening with the sector and to speak to them about some of the developments that have taken place at South Africa Tourism.
Uganda has inaugurated its first large-scale gold mine, a $250 million Chinese-owned project in the country's east that will also refine the bullion to 99.9% purity. The country, which has a variety of minerals, including copper, cobalt and iron ore, wants to expand its mining industry and position itself as a major gold producer and exporter. And finally, share markets have urged higher in Asia ahead of what is likely to have been an eventful week for U.S. interest rate policy, while oil prices slipped as risk to Russian supplies seemed to fade a little. U.S. President Donald Trump now seemed more aligned with Moscow on seeking a peace deal with Ukraine instead of a ceasefire first, after meeting Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday. For your financial indicators, $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 531. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 249. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 355, and in Zambia, it's 23 kwacha 123. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 roll 399. Russia is 80 rubles 2. India is 87 rupees 50. China at 7 yuan 18, and in South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 58. $1 is trading at 73 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,347 and platinum at $1,340 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $65.79 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nosipho Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
Right, to Channel Africa 1 is our handle. That's on our different social media platforms. And do get in touch with us because we'd love to hear your views or questions. Let's get into our G20 fact now. South Africa will host approximately 130 working group meetings and 23 ministerial level meetings throughout the year, ahead of the country hosting the 2-day G20 Leaders Summit in Johannesburg from November 22nd, marking the first time the summit is held in Africa. It will be under the theme Solidarity, Equality, Sustainability. That's our G20 fact for this Monday, the 18th of August.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
The inaugural 3-day Water Investment Summit held in Cape Town, South Africa, has managed to get an annual investment of 10 to 12 billion US dollars. The African Union AIP Water Investment Summit sought to attract investment to address water scarcity on the continent, as well as close to Africa's $30 billion water investment gap by promoting bankable projects and fostering partnerships. Nhlanhla Mahlangu attended the summit and filed this report.
The summit brought together heads of state, ministers, investors, and partners to mobilize at least $30 billion US dollars annually for climate resilient water and sanitation initiatives across the continent and to discuss ways to make serious investment in water. African Union Commissioner for Agriculture, Rural Development and Sustainable Development, Moses Vilakati, says the summit was highly successful.
Africa showcased 80 priority water investment projects from 38 different countries, which attracted an investment projection of between 10 to 12 billion US dollars a year through public and private sector participation. These projected figures do not include anticipated pledges and investments that will be consolidated in the coming 2 weeks. An online portal will be opened to enable more pledges and investment commitments. We came together, ladies and gentlemen, with a shared mission to close Africa's US $30 billion annual water investment gap. This is a huge gap. And we leave with renewed momentum, concrete commitments, and a bold vision for the future.
The Minister of Water and Sanitation in South Africa, Phemi Majodina, says governance, finance capacity, and data gaps in the water sector have been identified as challenges that need to be addressed going forward.
We're making a call as this summit to all governments to help to level the playing field in order to attract investors. Investors cannot invest when there is political instability. Investors don't want a risk of investing in a country which has no political will. Let us ensure that unnecessary red tapes in government that are holding back investors are attended to.
Delegate Bolo Onobolo, chairperson of the Regional Consultative Council for Water Resources Management for the ECOWAS countries, says the voice of the civil society was not strongly reflected.
A lot has been said about sustainability, but I find that the role that civil society must play in helping to strengthen systems, in helping to ensure that the investments are properly operated and managed by the users, I find the voice of the civil society not reflected strongly enough.
Another delegate from Pretoria, South Africa, Oscar Mala, says there needs to be more engagement with the SME sector.
Let us engage SMME into the water sectors, because without inclusivity in our economy, in the sectors, we cannot be able to bridge the gap in African countries with unemployment. Because every year, children are graduated, are seated at home. Some other, they end up committing suicide because they don't get where they can be absorbed. In the next conference, let us sing also trying to engage SMME in the water sectors so that they can benefit, contribute in the local economy of African countries.
The summit showcased multi-billion-dollar opportunities in the water sector, ongoing bulk water projects, and strategies to de-risk investments. With over 80 investment-ready water and sanitation projects showcased, the gathering emphasized special economic zones, climate-resilient financing, and integrated water management to drive socio-economic transformation. It saw matchmaking sessions for investors, financing panels, and the 2025 Water Changemaker Awards, recognizing innovative solutions in water stewardship. It culminated in a summit declaration to be presented to G20 leaders in November 2025, outlining commitments to favorable financing terms, project bankability, and data-driven decision-making. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Ntlanhla Mahlangu.
The first National Dialogue Convention held in Pretoria, South Africa this past weekend has mapped out a citizen-led dialogue framework. Despite technical glitches, walkouts and anger from delegates who accused organizers of failing to listen, discussions shifted toward the future of the process over the coming months. But questions remain about whether government will act on what comes out of these talks. Dimakadzo Lishoro has more.
The National Dialogue opened at UNISA's main campus in Pretoria with the promise of inclusivity, the goal to set a roadmap for community dialogues that will take place over the coming months. But tensions quickly showed, with some delegates accusing organizers of talking down to them instead of creating space for citizens to speak. One of the most vocal was a representative of the Rastafarian organization.
Excuse me. No, excuse me. Excuse me. First, you need to read the pedagogy of the oppressed. This process must be dialogical. It must not be one-sided. You don't come to talk down on us here. Nothing for us without us. Simple as that. And for the last time, this is a dialogue. Spend more time listening to us than telling us what to do. Stop talking down on us.
The anger reflected in what some described as years of broken promises. Sandra Leshabela, the president of the National Representative Council of Learners, says citizens feel disrespected.
We're called to a national dialogue where we're supposed to raise our concerns. But then the people that we're supposed to raise our concerns to, they rise up and they leave. We are raising the issues of health. The Minister of Health is not here. We're raising the issues of education. The Minister of Education is not here. The issues of sport. The Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture left way before the President left. You know, the Minister of Defense. So I feel like we are never going to get anywhere with the people that are leading us, because the people that are leading us want to make it maybe in the face of other countries that they're true leaders while they're failing the people that they're leading.
Professor Lisiba Tefo says those leading the National Convention should have spent more time listening than telling delegates what to do.
There is a sense that this is just a performative exercise, just ticking the box that we had this. I heard the president himself appealing to his colleagues, don't leave, go attend the plenaries, listen to the people and don't speak a lot, because this is not about you, it's about them. I heard the president say it. Yesterday noon, after lunch, I heard the deputy president asking his colleagues when they were eating and I was there. He said, when we live here, we all go there, right? We must listen, but let's not participate because it is not our day, it's the people's day. Did they go there? Most of them left.
But there were more measured voices. Civil society leader Bongiwe Ndoro says the first 2 days should be seen as a foundation.
I think this has been a very good and useful 2 days of our time across different sectors. It's really unfortunate that there are some citizens who chose to opt out of the process. But I think we must see this as the beginning of the dialogue process, one that is going to shape how the dialogue process unfolds and not necessarily what gets discussed as part of the dialogue process. So for me, this was a platform where we are shaping the methodology, we are shaping the key principles, we are shaping the process, and from here on we will start to see how the dialogue actually unfolds and reaches different parts of South Africa.
Chairperson of the committee responsible for organizing this weekend's event, Boichoko Ditlhake, cautioned that unless government implements outcomes of these dialogues, public trust would be completely destroyed.
My challenge and concern is not the process itself. I think there are good people who can make it happen. Is how do we guarantee South Africans that the outcome will actually be respected and implemented? That is my major concern. Because if we fail with this process and to implement, we'll never again gain the trust of South Africans and we'll never be able to bring them here and dialogue as we are doing.
Do you have any authority from the leadership that that's exactly what's going to happen?
I don't see any other alternative. I think this is what must happen. It must be respected and implemented.
Closing the convention, members of the Eminent Persons Group highlighted South Africa's history of dialogue from CODESA to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Former opposition leader Lindiwe Mazibuko says this new chapter must belong to citizens.
This inaugural convention was never intended to provide all the answers. It's a foundational step, setting the agenda for the long journey ahead. It is a powerful example of inclusivity and the beginning of a process that truly belongs to citizens in every community. From the outset, we established that citizens will drive this dialogue. Grounded in our President's commitment to unity, this dialogue is owned by the people.
The fiery exchanges this weekend showed just how fragile the process could be. The real test, though, for the national dialogue will be whether the spirit of debate can move forward from words to action and whether leaders will listen when citizens speak. For Channel Africa News, I'm Dimakatsa Leshoro in Pretoria.
The president of AMCU, a mining trade union in South Africa, Joseph Mathunjwa, has criticized South Africa's recent national convention and the upcoming national dialogue. He made the remarks at a commemorative event marking 13 years since police shot dead 34 mine workers in Marikana, leaving scores more injured or arrested. Mathunjwa described the process as a means for the country's elite to enrich themselves. Itumeleng Khajanje reports.
A spirit-filled Marikana commemoration marking 13 years of the massacre, but Joseph Mathunjwa would later spit fire against the national dialogue.
The national dialogue was supposed to have been convened soon after the Marikana massacre to discuss the economic crisis in our country, the looting of our resources by foreign directives, whom they call them foreign direct investors, illicit financial flows, and the lack of transformation in the mining sector under the ineffective mining charter. We should have had a national dialogue to stop politicians from having business interest in all mining sectors.
Mathunjwa also decried lack of developments in the mining areas.
Look at the squalors behind us. These are the mines that produces platinum. These are the mines of the world that produces platinum. We cannot afford that.
And some movement in terms of lawsuits were reported, as legal representatives Andres Nkome and Asenati Tukela explain.
Those that spent time in custody have been settled, and those that were injured have been settled. We would understand that we created two forms of claims, one against the state and second against the president in his personal capacity, as well as against loanmen. Now, instead of settling the claim against him as well as loanmen, the president raised technicalities to try and dismiss the claims that we brought. And fortunately for our clients, the court in Johannesburg, in the South Gauteng High Court, dismissed the technicalities.
We were only able to settle on the loss of support component of the claim. But in terms of the actual damages claim, the general damages claim, the claim for pain and suffering, for psychiatric injury, for grief and emotional trauma, the state refused to put an offer for settlement. In fact, they refused to engage on settlements entirely.
Widows of the deceased mine workers, Neliswa Nopiki and Nandi Payona, say they are not happy with the status quo. Nothing has changed. I still feel the same pain as before, and I feel it more as time goes on. I haven't healed.
Because ila pain isasekhona and andikazoxola imayini ikhona into eyenzileyo ukuthi cause
The mine has done something. It has given us jobs and it educates our children. I'm complaining about government because it has only compensated us for loss of life.
wasinja nje isinxepo se loss of support.
Meanwhile, AMCU says it is now pushing to have its lowest paid members earning 25,000 rand a month. It says it has long won the struggle for a monthly salary of 12,500 rand, which it waged in 2012. I'm Itumeleng Khajani in Marikana, Northwest.
The Recycling and Economic Development Initiative of South Africa, REDISA, has warned that illegal tyre dumping and burning is creating an environmental and health crisis in the country. The organization is calling on government to urgently implement a functional waste tyre management plan. Channel Africa's Lebogang Mabange reports.
Illegal tyre dumping and burning has been reported in several communities, including areas outside the city of Gqeberha, Freedom Park in Soweto Township, and along Baden-Powell Road in the city of Cape Town. Tyres clogging riverbeds and being set alight for warmth are becoming common sights. Stacey Jensen, Executive Director of Operations for REDISA, says urgent intervention is needed.
The most urgent step is to implement a functional, accountable waste tyre management plan without delay. The system must restore proper collection and recycling, employ and track waste collectors and transporters, and ensure that the fee collected annually is used solely for tyre management. Without this, the illegal dumping and burning will continue to spread, damaging public health and the environment.
Jensen says a workable solution must be based on evidence and proven models.
An effective plan would be evidence-based and built on a proven model, such as REDISA's 2012 to 2017 program. It should set clear environmental targets, be fully transparent in how funds are spent, support small and medium enterprises in the waste sector, and operate under the polluters pays principle, in other words, privately managed. Most importantly, it must have nationwide collection coverage so that tyres are never left to pile up in depots or dumped in communities or worse still pinned.
During the period REDISA managed the national plan, it created thousands of jobs and diverted hundreds of thousands of tons of tyres from illegal disposal. This is according to Jensen.
When REDISA managed the national plan, we created over 3,000 jobs and supported more than 226 small businesses, from waste collectors to recyclers. We diverted more than 306,000 tons of tyres from illegal dumping, turning them into raw materials for new products, road construction, and energy recovery and reuse. Reviving this system could again employ thousands, especially in lower income areas, and research shows that applying similar models to other waste streams could boost GDP by up to 1.5%.
But Jensen warns that the country lacks critical data on the true scale of the environmental and health impacts of waste tyre pollution.
The lack of data, whether it's in collection figures, recycling figures, or even health impacts, is a big concern to REDISA. Medical research has highlighted the poisonous nature of waste tyre pollution, especially when tyres are set alight. So we are in this terrible situation where, damage is being done, large-scale damage, but nobody has quantified it. In an ideal setup, our government would have been able to commission such impact studies.
Retisa says a new functional national tire management plan could not only address the environmental damage but also create significant economic opportunities through recycling and the circular economy. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
It's 7 o'clock Central African time. Thanks so much indeed for joining us for the second hour of the program where we bring you the African perspective. And we're broadcasting live from our studios in Johannesburg in South Africa on the internet at www.channelafrica.co.za. And you can also catch us on your mobile apps. Just look for SABC Plus and then Channel Africa and you can find us there. My name is Peter Ndoro. Good morning.
My name is Asanda Beda. Thank you so much for staying with us as Channel Africa. In this hour, we take a look at the 45th SADC Summit that is concluded in Antananarivo in Madagascar, and also Sudan facing its worst cholera outbreak in years, with war and displacement worsening the crisis. Doctors Without Borders have something to say on that, or MSF. Those stories and more, of course, coming up. Let's start with our news update. Here's Dwalane Tulo Mwepe with that. And following her will be Figile Lingwati with our sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. The matter of the burial of former Zambian President Edgar Lungu is back in the Pretoria High Court this morning. After it stood down on Friday, the Lungu family is in court for leave to appeal the full judgment, which ruled that the Zambian government is entitled to repatriate the former president's body to his home country. On Friday, the Lungu family and the Zambian government informed the court that they would be discussing the matter in an attempt to resolve the dispute over his final resting place. Sbahle Mota has the story.
The Pretoria High Court will hear if the Lungu family and the Zambian government have come to an agreement following a dispute over his burial. If both parties have not reached an agreement, then the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria is expected to proceed with the Lungu family's application for leave to appeal the entire full court judgment to the Supreme Court of Appeal. This after the Pretoria High Court ruled that the Zambian government could repatriate the late former president's body to his home country for a state funeral. Proceedings are expected to begin at 10 a.m.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has commended the Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan on her role she played as the SADC chairperson on politics, defense and security. Amongst other missions, Suluhu Hassan presided over the negotiations that discussed the security crisis in the Eastern DRC. Addressing the closing ceremony of the SADC heads of state and government in Madagascar, President Ramaphosa said some missions were difficult, but Suluhu Hassan showed leadership.
We salute Her Excellency Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan for her sterling leadership of the organ during her tenure. Admittedly, it was not an easy tenure considering the peace and security missions and challenges whose implementation she had to lead. Her fortitude and unfailing resolve, even when these missions were put to unprecedented test, is truly commendable.
More than 30 undocumented foreign nationals have been arrested, along with 800 people in Soweto, in the south of Johannesburg in South Africa at the weekend. The police-led Operation Chanela swooped on wanted suspects of crimes related to gender-based violence and drugs, illegal foreign migrants, and several owners of illegal shebeens. Gauteng Provincial Commissioner Tomi Mtombeni.
We managed to arrest 760, of which 172 is gender-based violence. We are, of course, in this second phase of the operation where we arrested 18 for drugs or possession of drugs, but hardcore drugs, of course. We had not less than 31 illegal immigrants. We are, of course, have closed 5 liquor outlets. As we know, the issues of liquor is a problem.
A prominent Sudanese human rights group has accused the country's army and security forces of torturing people to death and operating execution chambers. The emergency lawyers group said it had documented hundreds of arrests in the capital, Khartoum. It said that in the worst cases, some captives had later been found dead with evidence of torture. The Sudanese army recaptured the city from the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, in March, against which it is fighting a bitter civil war that has killed tens of thousands in 2 years. The fighting has sparked one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. 12 million people have been forced from their homes and famine has been declared in parts of the country. And finally, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia must stop with the killings before there's a peace deal. A host of European leaders said they'll join Zelensky in Washington today for his meeting with President Donald Trump. Zelensky participated in a virtual meeting of leaders alongside the European Commission head. Zelensky says Ukraine must be involved in any peace talks with Moscow and Russia.
Since the territorial issue is so important, it should be discussed only by the leaders of Ukraine and Russia at the trilateral Ukraine, United States, Russia. So far, Russia gives no sign that trilateral will happen, and if Russia refuses, then new sanctions must follow.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo Wepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Our sports headline: Bafana Bafana face off with Uganda in a do-or-die showdown of Chan. The new UFC middleweight champion Khamzat Chimaev dethroned Dricus du Plessis. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Just gone 6 minutes past 7 Central African Time. Let's take a look at this story on Rise and Shine. The 45th SADC Summit has concluded in Antananarivo in Madagascar, with Madagascar hosting and assuming the bloc's rotating presidency for the first time. Leaders focused on regional trade, industrialization, agriculture, and energy, while political and security issues across the region were also discussed. The summit also reaffirmed commitments to peace and stability in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo and highlighted the need for stronger intra-regional trade and economic integration. Joining us now is Marissa Lorenzo, independent political analyst and risk consultant, to help us unpack the summit's outcomes and what they mean for SADC's future. Marissa, thank you for making time for us on this Monday. How are you?
A very good morning to you, Asanda. I'm doing great, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, thank you so much. So Madagascar has now assumed the SADC rotating presidency. How significant is this for the country's influence and leadership within the bloc?
Well, it's actually fascinating to see the current president of Madagascar, and I'm going to butcher his name. It's Andre Rajoelina. It's actually fascinating to see him chairing the summit because in 2009, he led a coup in Madagascar, which was the start of a couple of years long political crisis in the country. And this move actually got Madagascar suspended from SADC for a period of 5 years, and then it got readmitted in 2014. So it's quite funny to see how much has actually changed. But it obviously bodes well for, I think, Madagascar's prominence and standing within the regional body.
The summit addressed peace and security issues, including the situation in the DRC. Do you think SADC member states are effectively presenting a united political front?
I think they present a united political front in the sense, that there is repeated talk of the need, to resolve the ongoing security crisis in the DRC. But I think that when it does come to security matters as a whole, I think SADC is just generally very ineffective. I mean, I've just spoken about how, yes, Madagascar did get suspended for the political crisis in 2009. But if we look at what's happened in Mozambique ever since the October general elections and the ongoing security issues in the country related to political repression. We don't really see SADC taking a stand on that, and it seems to be something that it continues to sweep under the carpet. It also does nothing to address, for example, when there was a military coup in Zimbabwe, it didn't really take the same stance. So I think when it comes to security issues, SADC, it can present a unified front on certain issues, but it doesn't really take action to resolve them. It never really wants to trample on countries in general, trample on other countries' sovereignty. But as a result, it means that it's not very effective at resolving these kind of security crises or political crises in the region.
And on that point, then, how realistic is it that the summit's commitments will translate into tangible political outcomes?
Yeah, I'm always very, very skeptical of this. And I mean, I can be quite harsh on SADC in general. I mean, it has made some progress in sort of setting, each country has to set up a kind of regional representation office, but many countries are behind on this. And if I look at what was discussed at the summit, they're talking about greater regional integration and greater economic integration. And I suspect that the reason why this theme has been so prominent is obviously because of global events triggered by US President Donald Trump, where he's withdrawing a lot of foreign support for countries. And obviously, countries like Madagascar, especially, are very reliant on this. Madagascar is classified as one of the poorest countries in the world, very reliant on foreign aid. But these types of talks have been going on for decades. They talk about the potential of the region's agricultural sectors. They talk about there's a lot of potential with renewable energy, but no real fundamental progress has been made in decades to actually, obviously, except for South Africa, but to have these agricultural sectors perform better, to develop agro-processing sectors. And Madagascar also has a very big challenge from climate change. It's very affected, much like Mozambique and Zimbabwe, by extreme weather events, especially flooding. It normally takes place between December and April. And it hasn't really gone away to sort of tackling these issues on its own. And I'm not really sure by announcing these commitments at a summit is going to go any sort of way to fixing this. The work needs to be done internally, and then there needs to be greater cooperation, but there needs to be tangible efforts rather than having summits and grand gestures.
On the topic of economics, SADC aims to increase manufacturing from 11% to 30% of GDP by 2030. Do you see these targets as achievable given the current infrastructure and policy environment?
Yeah, not achievable at all. I mean, 2030 it's not even 5 years away, it's 4 years away. We're nearly at the end of this year. I mean, South Africa is the only really industrialized economy within SADC. You've got, like you pointed out, infrastructure. We need way more development within SADC states to actually take place in order for that to be feasible. That would be a huge jump. And then again, yes, you need to have a supportive policy environment, and I don't really see that taking place in other countries, mostly because there are concerns over their politics, which naturally drives away investors. They also don't have the kind of energy needs that would support manufacturing. You've also got to tackle things like education, because you don't want to import labor for things like manufacturing if the goal is to drive economic growth in the country and to support the country's own development. But that is going to be what has to happen. And again, I wish SADC wouldn't sort of speak about these unrealistic targets, or I mean, any government in the world really. It sounds nice on paper to say that you're going to get there by 2030, but we need to have smaller goals. It would be fine to say you want to increase it by 2% by 2030. That would already make a big difference in the lives of thousands of people. But instead, they go for these bigger, grand things to make it sound like there's more being done. But it's just absolutely not realistic. And I mean, Madagascar as well is not, I think, very well integrated with SADC. It's much more integrated, especially countries in the Middle East, like the UAE. It's got greater links to countries like India and China. So for it to sort of start focusing on SADC regional integration would also be kind of a step away from how things have been done traditionally, which again also takes time and takes a lot of work.
You touch on agriculture and that having been addressed at the summit, and how it doesn't really seem like there were realistic strategies brought forward to modernize this sector. But let's talk about renewable energy now and industrial growth, which were also key priorities. How feasible is a just and inclusive energy transition in the SADC region?
I mean, the SADC region, most of the countries do have a very good renewables potential, especially with solar energy and solar much more than wind. But again, I think there is a long way to go in order for there to sort of be a kind of complete energy transition in the sense of renewable energy projects are great, but they are not able to sort of meet the entire energy needs of countries because renewable energy projects tend to be much smaller in scale than, say, coal or gas. They're obviously cheaper, they're obviously quicker to complete, which is a positive, but they're not able to sort of add all this extra capacity. But the other issue that most countries have, and including South Africa, is that there's not enough development of transmission and distribution infrastructure. So even if the region is able to generate as much power as it can, and it can do this through renewables, it's not going to be able to feed that into the grid. So there's all of these kind of intertwined problems that I don't think have been adequately addressed. And then I think, if we sort of take a step back and we look more broadly at, the just energy transition and the kind of narrative around it, and I mean this globally, we can really kind of see a sort of dip in support for it in the sense of obviously the US administration underneath Donald Trump is not a fan of this. It really wants to continue to promote fossil fuels. Most African states want to promote fossil fuels. We've even seen a slight difference in the way that some EU member states talk about the subject. So I think that, again, the just energy transition is something where the narrative is also changing and also shifting. So it's good for SADC to speak about renewable energy, but again, it needs to take into account expanding the grid as well and the investment that they need for that, and perhaps also realize that there may not be as much support for renewable energy projects coming externally, and not many states necessarily have the capacity to carry out these projects themselves.
Marissa, we'll leave it there for today. Again, we appreciate your insights and for making time.
Great. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Great. That's Marissa Lorenzo, independent political analyst and risk consultant.
África. Conhece o Ntivani?
Claro que sou eu.
Ntivani é o amante da música de corpo e alma.
Eu amo música africana.
Ele aprecia todos os tipos de melodias e passa os seus dias a ouvir a Channel África. Adivinha só, a Channel África quer ajudar o Ntivani e os amantes da música em todo o lado a descobrir ainda mais música incrível. Por isso, a Channel África está a convocar artistas africanos a submeterem as suas músicas. Músicos, lembrem-se de nos dar todas as informações relevantes no music@channelafrica.co.za. As submissões são a vossa oportunidade de ser ouvidos, mas não garantem inclusão na lista. Todas as submissões serão cuidadosamente analisadas para verificar se cumprem os requisitos da nossa estação. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
So Sudan is facing its worst cholera outbreak in years, with war and displacement worsening the crisis. Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, also known as MSF, reports treating over 2,000 patients and recording 40 deaths in just 1 week in Darfur alone. The outbreak has now spread beyond camps for the displaced into multiple towns and villages, overwhelming fragile health facilities. To discuss the situation and what's happening on the ground, we're now joined by Solomon Silla, who's the project coordinator for Doctors Without Borders in Sudan. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you. As you said, my name is Solomon Silla, from Nyala in South Darfur.
Could you start by giving us an outline of the current situation in terms of the outbreak across Sudan, particularly in Darfur? Just how bad is it compared to previous years?
Okay, at the moment, Sudan is facing severe and escalated cholera outbreak with the South and Central and North Darfur, as well as Blue Nile State, that is highly affected by the current outbreak. And we do see alarming situation in Tawila, North Darfur, where about 380 people have fled from the fighting from El Fasher. And this is also as a result of the overcrowding in the camp, with the little access to clean water, sanitation, and adequate shelters. So since August 2024, the Ministry of Health has reported over 99,000 cases and more than 2,400 deaths in just 1 week. And MSF facilities in Blue Nile and Darfur has recorded about 43 deaths and treated more than 2,400 patients.
Are you fearful that the situation will get worse before it gets better, given you're in the middle of war and seasonal rains?
Yeah, Medicines Sans Frontiers do see that with the current conflict, the situation will get worse because the conflict has destroyed essential infrastructures like water, sanitation, and healthcare facility, and has forced really millions of people from their homes, and now they are in these concentrated camps, which is crowded and with the very limited facilities, limited sanitation facilities, and also there is lack of water in these camps, so they have no access to safe drinking water, and they are forced to take water from contaminated sources. So we do see that this is not going to really get better soon, because also we have witnessed also here in Nyala, the destroyed water stations has resulted to people going to fetch water from contaminated sources, which is completely unsafe. But I know that there is efforts by UNICEF and other actors to rebuild this water station, and now it's starting to get up, but I don't see the situation getting better soon.
And on top of that, we believe that malnourishment is another big thing that you're dealing with.
Exactly. Malnutrition is one of the deadly consequences of this crisis. And as you know, hunger weakens children immunity, and children being the most affected in this crisis, when they leave their families and move into these concentrated camps, there is no food, there is no water, and children are vulnerable to this. And this has also accelerated them getting dehydrated and pushing them to be fragile, that get their body fragile and vulnerable to getting cholera easily. And this also, we see that children always arrive to our facilities severely dehydrated, and most of the time our health workers, they struggle to get them back to life. But it's really concerning that malnutrition is also one of those factors that we need to address in this crisis, and on top of the cholera outbreak.
Solomon, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very, very much indeed for that update. Let's hope that all these people get the relief that they need and that the situation turns. Thanks so much indeed for that update.
Thank you so much, and we also just call upon international community that to ensure there is systematic medical screening and rapid vaccination. And we know that UNICEF is on top of UNICEF and Ministry of Health is on top of getting cholera vaccines, we really call upon the international community to support in this. Thank you.
That was Solomon Silla, Project Coordinator for Doctors Without Borders, or Médecins Sans Frontières in Sudan.
Got something to say? Are you passionate about issues that matter? Do you have a voice that deserves to be heard? Well, we've got the perfect platform for you. Call in or drop us a WhatsApp on +27 63 406 9126 and we will call you back so you could have your say and be part of the conversation.
30 years of age. I just turned 30 on the 15th of November. So that's who I am, you know.
It's not just talk, it's your chance to air your views, share your opinion, engage with the community that values your perspective. Follow us on our social media. Visit our website at www.channelafrica.co.za and get ready to share your views on Channel Africa, the African perspective. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Dr. Nkechi Owu from the University of Ghana says that in both South Africa and Ghana, a large part of the workforce, particularly women, remains in the informal sector, where labor protections, benefits and job security are limited or non-existent. She made the remarks while presenting a joint Ghana-South Africa research project titled Gendered Aspects of Economic Security at Stellenbosch Business School in Cape Town, South Africa, where key policy recommendations were also being discussed. Channel Africa's economics reporter Innocent Samosa has more.
The project, developed in partnership with Stellenbosch Business School, the University of Ghana, and the Levy Economics Institute, aims to highlight the structural barriers that limit women's economic participation and security in both countries. During her presentation, Asima Sina shared the gender gaps between South Africa and Ghana.
So overall, the gender wage gap is more severe in Ghana. So this is what we're seeing here is the female to male ratio. A higher ratio means less gender gap. So there is higher gender inequality in Ghana because of the lower female to male ratios there. And that holds for kind of all levels of percentiles that we see of wages. So if we were to move from none to severe deprivation level of job quality, we see that the earnings follow a downward shift. So these boxes, the red ones are women and the blue boxes are men. Both of these are if you see there's a sort of a negative relationship as we move from none to severe level of deprivation.
Dr. Nkechi Owu from the University of Ghana says earnings and the degree of deprivations weakens employment relations.
The focus is on job quality. It will be important to include an income or an earnings dimension. If you look at other existing work that has been done by the ILO and the World Bank in this respect, the current focus doesn't include an income dimension when you look at the construction of job quality. So it may not be fully capturing this concept if that is what the focus of the researchers is. And since, even though there might be a concern that wages data isn't always available, I think later on wages are imputed. So perhaps as a robustness check, we can have another job quality index.
Ajit Zacharias is a senior scholar and director of the Institute's Distribution of Income and Wealth Program, says there's a significant gap within jobs in Ghana.
What the research is showing is that for the gender gaps, you can see that the total difference, which is the D, is the sum of the numbers shown in the intra-job and the composition numbers. So for Ghana, we have an interesting result that there is a significant gap within jobs between genders, but that's being offset by the composition effect. Whereas in South Africa, almost all the gap is driven by the composition effect. Finally, turning to the inter-country gaps, we can see that the difference between either South African men and Ghanaian men or South African women versus Ghanaian women is generally driven largely by the intra-job effect. That is, if you pick any industry occupation cell, the women or men in South Africa perform better in terms of job quality than the Ghanaian.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samosa in Johannesburg.
Right, let's take a look back today in history. 1960, an interesting development took place. Senegal became fully independent. Although Senegal had gained its independence from France as part of its the Mali Federation on June the 20th, 1960, the federation collapsed shortly thereafter. And on August 18, 1960, Senegal formally declared itself an independent republic with Leopold Sédar Senghor as its first president. There you go, very interesting development that took place in 1960 on this day, the 18th of August. It's 7:30 now, Central African time, which means it's time for you to be caught up with the news headlines, and then coming up after that, it's the world of sport with Fikile Lingwati. Both Fikile and I are Man United supporters, so this weekend we played really well, but we lost because our goalkeeper's a bit dodgy. But all of those details coming up after.
Always someone to blame.
Indeed. Here's Jolani Tulongweve.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines. The matter of the burial of former Zambian President Edgar Lungu is back in the High Court in South Africa this morning after it stood down on Friday. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has commended the Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan on the role she played as the SADC chairperson on politics, defense and security. And Fandi police in Israel have arrested at least 25 people following nationwide protests. I will have details on these and other stories at 8 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
All right, let's catch up with Fikile Lingwati, who's got our sports update here on Rise and Shine. Who are we blaming this time around, Fikile? Always someone to blame in the world of sports. Good morning.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
No, Asanda, this time around, we don't blame anyone, but we will know about the blame tonight. The Mandela National Stadium will be buzzing as Uganda and South Africa square off in the final Group C clash at the Total Energies African Nations Championship CHAN 2024 tonight. For Uganda, it is a chance to script history on home soil. For South Africa, it's a do or die. With a sold-out crowd expected, this showdown has the feel of a continental final before the knockouts have even begun. The mathematics are simple but brutal. Uganda topped the group with 6 points, needing just a draw to advance. South Africa sit a point behind on 4, meaning victory is their only path forward. Algeria still lurking with 3 points, face Niger and could pounce if the Kampala clash produces a decisive result in their favor. Still on the CHAN, Morocco sealed a 3-1 victory over DR Congo to clinch their place in the quarterfinal of the tournament 2024, while Kenya topped Group A after defeating Zambia. Heading into the final group stage matches, the stakes were high. Morocco only needed a draw to progress, while DR Congo required a win to stay alive. The Atlas Lions struck first in the 8th minute through Usama Lamloui, who finished from close range after a cross by Youssef Bellamari. Although a 4th goal was disallowed by VAR, DR Congo could not recover, ending their campaign in disappointment. The new UFC middleweight champion Khamzat Chimaev dethroned Dricus du Plessis on Sunday morning, with the South African graciously accepting defeat without offering any excuses. After 5 rounds at the United Center in Chicago, the judges delivered a unanimous decision in favor of the Russian, declaring him the clear winner. Du Plessis admitted the pain of surrendering his crown.
Yeah, I mean, the man has incredible control on the top. He's just like a blanket. I mean, it wasn't a matter of strength or, it wasn't that physical. It was just, it's almost as if he knew what your next move was going to be. And he got it without using too much power. And I had to decide, am I going to be on my back or have him on my back? I could almost taste that victory, but, big ups to Khamzat. He deserves this 100%. He beat me fair and square tonight. He was the better man tonight.
The new middleweight champion boasted about his takedown strength, saying going the distance instead of ending the fight early was to dismiss doubts over his cardio.
That's just to have fun with my friends. I take them in this position, like holding them 25 minutes, 1 hour sometimes. They let them have so make them humble. Some guys, like, nobody can take me down, hold me down. So I take them to the gym, hold them down there with this position. So yeah, I does this a lot.
Let's end with tennis news. The world's top two tennis players will be at each other again, this time in the final of the Cincinnati Open. Top seed and defending champion Jannik Sinner ended French qualifier Terence Atmanou's dream run with a 7-6, 6-2 victory to advance to the final. And second seed Carlos Alcaraz defeated German third seed Alexander Zverev to set up a showdown with Sinner, a repeat of the French Open and Wimbledon finals. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fikile Ngwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Channel Africa and you have got something in common. The thirst for knowledge. Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week, bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Let's take another turn to the business news desk with Nosipho Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. In your business news this hour, the president of Botswana, Duma Boko, says there is an urgent need for African countries to trade more with each other to avoid severe economic hits when foreign powers introduce new policies. He was speaking at the Southern African Development Community SADC Heads of State Government Summit that took place in Madagascar on Sunday. His comments come at a time when exports from African countries have suddenly been hit with U.S. tariffs and richer nations have significantly reduced aid spending. Boko lamented what he referred to as trade mood swings.
We've seen how over-reliance on trade with certain powers of the world has rendered us so fatally vulnerable that we are now dependent on their mood swings. They determine what happens on the African continent.
The Democratic Alliance Party wants South Africa's Minister of Tourism, Patricia de Lille, to urgently account to Parliament following a precautionary suspension of South African Tourism CEO Nombulelo Guliwe. The party says de Lille's decision of attacking the boss decision will scapegoat Guliwe. De Lille says, according to legal advice, only the chairperson of the board can call a board meeting, and SA Tourism currently has no board chairperson. The DA's Hasina Hishma.
Instead of focusing on the serious allegations against the CEO, the minister is fixated on whether the board had the authority to suspend her without a chairperson, a distraction that risks letting the CEO off the hook. However, it cannot be that the minister attacks the board while giving no attention to the serious allegations against the CEO.
De Lille's spokesperson Aldrin Simpier says the minister believes the board resolution was unlawful.
The minister has written to the board members to get their reasons why they believe the board should not be dissolved. The submissions have now been received and the minister is currently looking at those. The minister will also be convening with the sector and to speak to them about some of the developments that have taken place at South Africa Tourism.
Uganda has inaugurated its first large-scale gold mine, a $250 million Chinese-owned project in the country's east that will also refine the bullion to 99.9% purity. The country, which has a variety of minerals, including copper, cobalt, and iron ore, wants to expand its mining industry and position itself as a major gold producer and exporter. And finally, share markets have urged higher in Asia ahead of what is likely to be an eventful week for U.S. interest rate policy, while oil prices slipped as risks to Russian supplies seemed to fade a little. U.S. President Donald Trump now seemed more aligned with Moscow on seeking a peace deal with Ukraine instead of a ceasefire first, after meeting Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday. The major economic event of the week will be the Kansas City Federal Reserve's August 21st and 23rd Jackson Hole Symposium, where Chair Jerome Powell is due to speak on the economic outlook and the central bank's policy framework. Your financial indicators: $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 531. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 249. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 355, and in Zambia, it's 23 kwacha 123. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 rule 399. Russia is 80 rubles 02. India, it's 87 rupees 50. China at 7 yuan 18, and in South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 58. $1 is trading at 73 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,347 and platinum at $1,340 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $65.79 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nosipo Soma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. 9 to 12 midday, Central African Time. On the move with Palisa Tau and Benjamin Mushatami.
Should influencers be expected to be impactful in society? If there is a social or societal conversation that goes up, should we be waiting eagerly to hear what the influencers have to say?
They are more than just entertainers. They are thought leaders to some certain degree. They influence culture. They influence people's thought processes. They set trends. They shape opinions of people. And the sad reality is, although a lot of them don't want to accept it, I think we're getting better with them realizing that embarking in that journey and in that space comes with a certain level of responsibility.
I see it differently in that, professionals are already good at their job, but there is an optionality that they might have to use the position that they hold in society to be able to deliver a message. This year you made the example of actors and actresses. So the same could apply to a sportsman. Just because someone's good at soccer doesn't mean that they have to have an influence over society from a specific standpoint.
Keeping you on the know and on the move. Download the SABC app and take Channel Africa with you everywhere you go. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
The Democratic Republic of Congo has rejected Kenya's appointment of a consul general to the eastern city of Goma, calling the move inappropriate and a breach of its territorial integrity. Goma has been at the center of fighting between the Congolese army and the M23 rebel group, which captured the city earlier this year. Critics say that Kenya's decision could complicate an already fragile regional peace effort. We now speak to political analyst Jean-Baptiste Gasso-Minari, who give us a little bit more analysis on the situation. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
That's fine.
Hi, Jean-Baptiste, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Great. What message do you think the DRC government is sending by rejecting Kenya's appointment so swiftly?
Well, I think it was premature because what Kenya did was just a nomination by the president's office, which is one of its prerogatives to nominate diplomats that will serve in foreign lands. So as the law says, actually the executive nominates, and then these people are vetted by parliament. Once approved, their names are forwarded to the governments that are supposed to receive them as host countries. Then upon approval, that's when they can start working. So I think what DRC government did was premature because the consulate of Kenya in Goma, DRC is not new. It has been there before. So if they were renewing the mandate or nominating new people, then I think the Kenyan government was right to do so, but it was up to the Congolese government to tell the Kenyan government when names are forwarded that they no longer control the city of Goma and that therefore they cannot approve somebody who served there as a Kenyan consulate or a Kenyan consul, yes.
I am curious a little bit because there's a full embassy, I'm guessing, in Kinshasa already, right? And that these consulate offices are almost branches of the embassy in Kinshasa because of the size of the country. Here in South Africa, it's not uncommon to have an embassy in Pretoria and a consulate in Cape Town, Durban, or maybe even Johannesburg. Would you need special permission to have additional offices to the embassy, essentially?
Yes, actually, that's the case. That's the case. Kenya has an embassy in Kinshasa, and for some times back, it had also opened a consulate in Goma. But all were done with the full agreement of Kinshasa government. So the embassy in Kinshasa hasn't closed. The embassy is there. And the nomination also concern the Kinshasa embassy. So as I said earlier, it is up to the Kinshasa government to approve or to disapprove any candidate submitted to them for approval. So I do not see where lies a problem really, which even led the Minister of Foreign Affairs of DRC to call on phone the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kenya. Because, you know, as diplomatic missions work, they work in full agreement with the host country. And it's up to the host country actually to decline or to approve any nominee to any position within the embassy. So for me, actually, I really do not see why people are agitated. Maybe it's because of the recent history between Kenya and DRC as far as AFC is concerned. By AFC, I mean Alliance Fleuve Congo, because I think 2 years back, there was also a protestation or an indignation from the government of Kinshasa because the announcement of the creation of the alliance was made in Nairobi. Maybe it's because of that unfortunate event that took place 2 years back that led them to protest the nomination of a consul in Goma. But I think in while nominating, the Kenyan authorities just wanted to maybe renew their nominees, nominate new people on the position that were in existence before, long before the capture of the city of Goma by AFCM 23. And I think as it stands now, there were so many diplomatic missions that were represented in Goma, which have moved to the city of Beni after the capture of Goma by AFC M23. So for me, I see it as a routine nomination by a government that is sovereign. Now the approval or the decline of those nominations lie in the hands of the government of Kinshasa.
Might Nairobi have been a bit more sensitive, given that the M23 effectively controlled Goma, that maybe a consulate there, a new consul general, might be seen as legitimizing the M23's control of the city, because they undoubtedly would have to deal with the local authority, inverted commas, which is the M23 at this time.
Yeah, but provided that the nomination is approved, and the approving authority is the Kinshasa government, not AFC M23. So I do not see how a consul may start working in a foreign land without his letters of accreditation being duly endorsed by the host government. So I do not see a rebellion or a movement like AFC endorsing on behalf of a government these letters of credence of a foreign diplomat. So for me, it is impossible, because nomination itself is not enough. So approval and presentation of these credence letters matter. And I do not see a Kenyan diplomat going to the head of AFC M23 for approval of his letter of credence. So I think it's something that is impossible, because the approving authority is the Kinshasa government, and I think they should have waited for the Kenyan government to forward the names. Then they would tell them that, yes, we have seen the names, but we cannot approve this unless if he or she works from Beni, where other institutions have moved to after the capture of the city of Goma by the rebel group AFC M23.
All right, so I'm just wondering now, it looks as if Kenya and DRC now are almost protagonists, and does that make it harder for Kenya to be seen as a mediator, as a moderator for issues in the region now?
Yeah, I don't think so for now, because, when there is no mutual trust, I think you cannot mediate somebody who does not trust you. So if the authorities in Kenya or if the authorities in Kinshasa see Kenya as an ally or somebody who supports a rebellion that is fighting it, then that status of mediator would be questioned. So I don't think, but now the processes that are ongoing, I think the Nairobi process is a defunct process now. So the processes that now are ongoing is the one mediated by the president of Togo, mandated by African Union, and the one that is ongoing in Doha, Qatar, which is facilitated by Qatar, of course. So I really don't see Kenya being a mediator when it has lost trust from Kinshasa.
And then practically on the ground, does this make any difference to the people in the eastern part of the DRC and those in Goma, this diplomatic row, spat, whatever we want to call it, between Nairobi and Kinshasa?
Not at all.
All right, so what risks are there if this rift between Nairobi and Kinshasa escalates, do you think?
I really don't see it. well, maybe it will be just an escalation in statements and declarations, but it won't go beyond that point.
All right, and I guess perhaps could anything be done to try and calm the situation a little bit and step back and perhaps improve relations between the two countries?
Yeah, mainly dialogue, and I think it has started because as the media made it public yesterday, there was a phone call between the Congolese Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Prime Cabinet Minister in Kenya in charge of Foreign Affairs. So they have, since they have started talking, definitely they will continue talking until they get an agreement between between themselves.
All right, so that's where we're going to leave it. Thank you so much indeed for joining us and giving us your analysis, Jean-Baptiste.
Thank you so much.
That was a look at this diplomatic row between Nairobi and Kinshasa, Kenya appointing, or in fact nominating, a consul general in Goma in the east of the DRC, and Kenya doesn't want anything to do with it. I mean, DRC doesn't want anything to do with it.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
Standard Bank has confirmed that Group CEO Sim Tshabalala is set to step down by the end of 2027, together with Chief Financial Officer Arno Daeneke. In a statement, the bank provided clarity that the recent decision to raise the retirement age for executives from 60 to 63 years old would not affect the pair. For the 6 months to the end of June, Africa's biggest lender by assets reported a 10% increase in headline earnings per share. The half-year results were led by growth in the corporate and investment banking unit, despite a tough operating environment. SABC News economics reporter Nosipo Khadebe has more.
The bank welcomed the half-year performance despite negative sentiment in South Africa's economy, weighed down by tensions with the US and uncertainty over the national budget process. CEO Sim Tshabalala has highlighted the corporate and investment banking unit as their standout performer after it delivered a robust set of results with headline earnings up 16% to 12 billion rand.
So we're lending to corporates, and these corporates were doing activities associated with energy, logistics, non-bank financial institutions, and so forth. Secondly, slower growth in our balance sheet arising from consumers, principally home loans, vehicle and asset finance, and unsecured lending.
Tshabalala also explains that the bank has been busier with local clients.
A large part, though, of the fees and commissions and non-funded revenues came in the nature of great activity in South Africa, where we're doing more with our clients, a larger customer base, resulting in fees and commissions growing by about 11% in South Africa.
He acknowledges that consumers, particularly the lower LSM bracket, have been under pressure after years of elevated interest rates, despite the recent cuts.
As you go up the wealth structures of the country, people are doing better. There's less difficulty with people paying their loans at the top end of the market. But even there, people are starting to find it difficult. We've noticed that people are drawing down on their two pots. They are withdrawing their savings in order to repay their loans. So there's a tough one. However, in the case of Standard Bank, what we've seen a combination of people benefiting from the declining interest rates. We've seen people benefiting from sustained jobs, particularly at the top end of the market.
Bad debts have slowed down, which is showing up in the credit loss ratio of 93 basis points. Standard Bank's South African business delivered 11.6 billion rand in earnings, with its Africa regions that include Angola, Ghana, Kenya and Nigeria contributing 9.7 billion rand. Nosipho Debe, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Okay, so it's a little bit before the top of the hour, and like I do at this moment in time, I always like to look back a little bit in history. And did you know, Asanda, that in 1991 there was a coup attempt in Russia, of all places? Yeah, Mikhail Gorbachev was the head of state at the time, and hardline Communist Party officials just were not feeling his reforms. And they tried to seize control of the Soviet government, but the coup failed due to public resistance, and its failure contributed significantly to the final collapse of the Soviet Union. So, significant moment in time, 1991, there was a coup attempt in Russia. One would find it hard to imagine. It's 8 o'clock Central African time, which means it's time for the last hour of Rise and Shine right here on Channel Africa, where we bring you the African perspective. Broadcasting live from Johannesburg, South Africa on the internet at www.channelafrica.co.za. I'm Peter Ndoro.
My name is Asanda, Beda. A very good morning to you, and thank you for joining or staying with us as we cover the last hour at Channel Africa 1 is our handle across our different social media platforms. You can find us live streaming on YouTube on that same handle, also on the SABC Plus app. And in this hour, we look at Ethiopia's economy and how this economy is being recorded to be one of the fastest growing in Africa. Last week, we spoke about a launch of a funding into a new airport that will be built in the country, set to be the biggest. And so we'll get analysis in terms of the general economy of the country, joined by professors or an economist from Ethiopia, who's also a businessman, as well as a professor at one of South Africa's universities to unpack. First, let's get our news. Here's Jolani Tulo Mwepe, and then Figile Lingwate will follow with sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. More than 30 people remain missing in Nigeria after a boat conveying 50 persons to a popular market in northwest Sokoto State capsized yesterday. The passengers were traveling to Goronyo Market, a popular food produce market in the state, when the boat capsized. 10 people have been rescued. The head of the National Emergency Management Agency says it is collaborating with local authorities and emergency responders in a search and rescue operation to locate the missing persons. 3 weeks ago, at least 13 people died and dozens more were missing after a boat ferrying around 100 passengers capsized in Niger State in north central Nigeria. The matter of the burial of former Zambian President Edgar Lungu is back in the Pretoria High Court in South Africa this morning after it stood down on Friday. The Lungu family is in court for leave to appeal the full judgment, which ruled that the Zambian government is entitled to repatriate the former president's body to his home country. On Friday, the Lungu family and the Zambian government informed the court that they would be discussing the matter in an attempt to resolve the dispute over his final resting place. Sbahle Mota reports.
The Pretoria High Court will hear if the Lungu family and the Zambian government have come to an agreement following a dispute over his burial. If both parties have not reached an agreement, then the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria is expected to proceed with the Lungu family's application for leave to appeal the entire full court judgment to the Supreme Court of Appeal. This after the Pretoria High Court ruled that the Zambian government could repatriate the late former president's body to his home country for a state funeral. Proceedings are expected to begin at 10 a.m.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has commended Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan over the role she played as the SADC chairperson on politics, defense and security. Amongst other missions, Suluhu Hassan presided over the negotiations that discussed the security crisis in the eastern DRC. Addressing the closing ceremony of the SADC heads of state and government in Madagascar, President Ramaphosa said some missions were difficult, but Suluhu Hassan showed leadership.
We salute Her Excellency Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan for her sterling leadership of the organ during her tenure. Admittedly, it was not an easy tenure, considering the peace and security missions and challenges whose implementation she had to lead. Her fortitude and unfailing resolve, even when these missions were put to unprecedented test, is truly commendable.
A prominent Sudanese human rights group has accused the country's army and security forces of torturing people to death and operating execution chambers. The emergency lawyers group said it had documented hundreds of arrests in the capital Khartoum. It said that in the worst cases, some captives had later been found dead with evidence of torture. The Sudanese army recaptured the city from the paramilitary rapid support forces in March, against which it is fighting a bitter civil war that has killed tens of thousands in 2 years. The fighting has sparked one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. 12 million people have been forced from their homes and famine has been declared in parts of the country. And finally, police in Israel have arrested at least 25 people following nationwide protests. Thousands are demanding a deal to secure the release of hostages in Gaza. The strike, backed by the opposition, has been called by the families of the hostages. They say government's plans to seize control of Gaza City put the lives of those held by Hamas at greater risk. The BBC's Emir Nader has the details.
We've seen universities, their staff walk out. Many of the main roads and intersections have been blocked since early this morning, with a kind of an escalation of tactics by some of the protesters. We've seen the burning of tyres to block roads. There's been the use of water cannon against protesters near Prime Minister Netanyahu's house.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo Webe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headlines, South Africa's men's netball goal shooter Lutendo Maiwashi is focused on the netball championship. The new UFC middleweight champion Khamzat Chimaev dethroned Dricus du Plessis. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Beda, Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Ethiopia's economy is recorded as one of the fastest growing in Africa. A week ago, the African Development Bank confirmed that it will contribute $500 million towards US dollars towards the financing of a new airport in Ethiopia, which is expected to be Africa's largest when completed in 2029. This is to boost Ethiopia's growing economy, especially in the tourism sector. Now, this morning, we'll look at what makes and shapes the economy of Ethiopia. For this discussion, we're joined by Ethiopian businessman and economist Zemedene Negatu. Zemedene, thank you so much for joining us. How are you this Monday?
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on your program again.
Our pleasure. There was a time when Ethiopia was synonymous with famine and conflict and a dependence on foreign aid. It is now one of Africa's fastest growing economies. What do you believe has contributed to this evolution?
Right, very, very good question. Let me give you a very quick background. At the beginning of this century, around the year 2000, the Ethiopian economy, as measured by the GDP, was about $10 billion, which is obviously very small. And then you fast forward today, 2025, it's amongst the 5 largest economies in Africa. That's a pretty remarkable growth trajectory over 20, 25 years. And as you indicated, in the old days, the bad old days, I call them in the 70s and 80s, Ethiopia was known with a poster child, actually, for all the wrong reasons. Famine, and other things. So to have transformed to a point where it is one of the, as I said, 5 largest economy, indicates that Ethiopia has been doing a lot of the right things. It did face some challenges, a lot of challenges actually along the way, but it has surmounted many of them. So the answer to your question, what is it that's driving the economy? And then again, context is important. In terms of its population, it's the second largest after Nigeria in Africa. It's 130 million people. The demographics actually is very attractive. It's the median age of Ethiopia is under 20, 130 million, very young population. So that also plays in its favor in terms of its economic development. It can deploy a very large number of young people, trainable, educatable, deployable into many of the sectors. And I'll talk about in a second what those sectors are. So the demographics, as I said, is one of them. But if you also look at it from a historical perspective, it's the only country in Africa that was never colonized. It has a deep historical legacy in about 3,000-year history, going back a long ways back, actually. So it's a nation that's been around for a long time, but it's only in the recently that's been regaining, economically speaking, its momentum, the rightful place. So what are the drivers of the economic growth? And as you indicated in your introduction, it is one of the fastest growing economies in Africa and amongst one of the fastest in the world. So there are 5 pillars. I think the government has put together a strategy for the next 10 years. And their view is that focus on where Ethiopia has both competitive and comparative advantages. So one of them is obviously agriculture. Today, it's a very agrarian country. 80% of Ethiopians still live in the rural areas and farming, but it's being transformed from basic subsistence farming to mechanized industrial strength farming. So that's one of the priority areas, but not only basic farming or industrialized farming, but the value addition. I always use the simple example of converting the beautiful Ethiopian coffee from the raw coffee to Nespresso. That's the kind of value addition we're talking about. So it has a larger head count of cattle in Africa. Again, it's going to leverage that. So agriculture is one of the buckets. There are 5 of them. The next one is manufacturing, especially labor-intensive manufacturing, shoes, clothing, electronics, pharmaceuticals. Again, that's one of the pillars that the government has put as a priority. The third one, which you also mentioned in your introduction when you were linking into the new airport, is tourism. Obviously, in South Africa, you have a fantastic tourism industry. It contributes a lot to the South African GDP. In the case of Ethiopia, it's a nascent industry, has not been fully exploited. In fact, it's just getting started. And it has a lot of beautiful features in Ethiopia for tourists. I always joke that the only thing at the moment Ethiopia doesn't have is the coastal line, but hopefully one day we'll get that back too. But tourism is it has a lot of UNESCO heritage sites as well. The fourth one is natural resources. Again, something South Africa is very good at, it's a world leader. And in the case of Ethiopia, and I talked to a lot of CEOs around the world, natural resource, oil and gas, mining, gold, and all that, potash. And they all say it's one of the most underexplored natural resource sector in the world, Ethiopia, they're referring to. So I think the government has put a priority. And to indicate actually something they're working right in the natural resource space is about 3 years ago, the total exports of gold, for example, from Ethiopia is 100 million. This year was over $2 billion, just in a span of 3-4 years by rejigging policies, focusing on certain things. And the final one, which I think is really doable, is ICT, technology. As I mentioned to you, a lot of young Ethiopians deployable. And I think these are the 5 pillars. So what's been driving the growth is in 2 phases. The first phase, starting in the early 2000s, it was modeled with the state very similar to early days China, very similar to early days South Korea, where the state led the economic transformation. But it was determined later on that in the last 6-7 years that wasn't going to be sustainable. It was a lot of debt fueled. So and also it didn't bring structural transformation. In particular, the private sector was not growing as fast and as big as it was expected. So a transformation, a reform agenda was implemented about 5 years ago called the Homegrown Economic Reform Program 1. And then just last year, Homegrown Economic Reform Part 2 was implemented. The desire, the goal is to transform the economy into a sustainable middle income and obviously in the longer term an upper income country. So what they're trying to do, the government's trying to do is transform, move from a state-led economic development, which delivered results in the early days, but it wasn't sustainable, it was debt-fueled, as I said, to where the private sector is the lead. And the lead indicator, the big indicator for me, and I'm sitting here, for example, in the first investment bank in Ethiopia called the CB Capital. We as investment bankers, who just started operating about 4 months ago, are looking at these things, and actually we're very excited. We're focused and trying to deploy capital in an environment where the private sector is going to be lead. So for example, to give you an idea, credit, which is the fuel that lubricates economic growth, especially for the private sector. This past year, the data we have, the government has published and the banks have published, 80% of lending credit is now being given to the private sector. If you go back 3-4 years ago, it was just the reverse. 80% was going to the government or government-led enterprises. So that shows you that results are starting to be delivered, this transformation from a state-led to private sector. There are places where the private sector has a very significant role for what has been driving the economy. The government's fiscal year ended July 7th, 2025, about a month ago. They reported that exports were about $7.6 billion. That's a record amount. The year before was only $4 billion, and they're looking at even bigger numbers this year. If you look at the currency reserve, again, the central bank recently released this big picture data. They're saying that they have the record reserves, foreign exchange reserves in Ethiopia's history, and the total foreign exchange inflow in the country was also a record, $32 billion, unheard of. So a lot of things are happening right now. There are challenges. We could talk about that, what needs to be done to surmount these challenges, but these are just what's the answer to your question in a long-winded way. This is the result.
You touch on one of those pillars, those 5 pillars that have contributed to Ethiopia's growth in economy as being on demographics, and more specifically Ethiopia's labor force, which consists mainly of young people under the age of 20, you said, and it is low cost. So how can this be leveraged to be attractive for countries that want to tap into the African market?
Right. So let me relate to you at a personal level. I'm myself, we're involved in manufacturing in Ethiopia. I'm a chairman of a big international, multinational clothing manufacturing company. It's a European company, so I'm a chairman here. We today produce in Ethiopia for the global market. And the amazing thing, I got to be honest with you, is productivity in our Ethiopian factory is about 90 to 95% of our European factories. Imagine that. And we've only been producing in Ethiopia just a few years, 3-4 years. Our labor cost, though, is a fraction of what we pay in Europe for the same product that ends up on the shelves, not outlet malls, but on shelves in Champs-Elysees, Oxford Street in London, Main Street in Europe, produced in Ethiopia, the same quality that we produce in Europe and other parts of the world. So that shows you that manufacturing, if done right, the structure right, the supply chain is managed, and most importantly, you invest in your people, you train them, you educate them, you share the benefit with people, they deliver these kinds of results. So my message actually is not just for Ethiopia, a lot of the bigger countries, including South Africa, which is very good at manufacturing. Of course, yours is a much higher end, like you make BMWs and Mercedes. But for the rest of Africa that wants you to go into manufacturing, you got to get right and invest in your people. In Ethiopia, out of the 130 million people, something like 60, 65 million are actually deployable young people who could do this kind of stuff. And also what is happening is the perfect alignment between what Ethiopia is trying to focusing on in manufacturing, what countries like China are trying to do, which is move out of labor-intensive, low-end manufacturing. As you know, China is now the second largest economy in the world. I don't think they want to do clothing that much more anymore. The shoes and low-end electronics, they want to focus on high-end. So the Chinese and others who are becoming wealthier are now going to offload these kinds of manufacturing to Africa, and Ethiopia is one of those countries which has been very well prepared because it's invested a very significant sum in industrial parks. If you come to Ethiopia, you have these massive industrial parks across the country, which were built over the last 10 years in anticipation of this kind of mega trends, things moving from Asia to Africa, and Ethiopia has been able to capture. So it is doable. It requires a lot of work. Market access is not easy, but if you partner with international manufacturers from Asia and Europe, and to produce it in Africa, sending it to Europe and obviously to the United States, I think it is doable. Of course, as you know, with all the big changes that are taking place around the world, with the United States, leading the tariff strategy that it has now, perhaps countries like Ethiopia, which has the lowest tariff rate, for example, for the US, which is 10%, which is the base, can easily compete with Asian manufacturers like Vietnam in clothing, for example, with Bangladesh and others, which have a much higher tariffs. So the bottom line is manufacturing is doable, but it needs smart long-term strategy.
Talking of alignment and citing countries like China and Korea, I think also Vietnam is another economic playbook that Ethiopia has touched on or extracted reference from. You touch on that state-led development model that works in two phases, but how does this model mirror the economic playbooks of countries like China and Korea? And should it extract reference instead of doing a copy and paste to ensure that it is unique to Ethiopia?
Right, absolutely. It's unique to Ethiopia, but we have a playbook that has worked. In my lifetime, I'm old enough to remember this. In my lifetime, China went from being a very, very, very poor country to the second largest economy in the world. South Korea, and here's an interesting point. During the Korean War, Ethiopia sent soldiers to South Korea to help stave off the war with North Korea, okay? Because South Korea was a very, very poor country. So for me, a lot of the models, the development path the Asian tigers took is actually very apt, very applicable to countries like Ethiopia. It is not going to be a cut and paste because some things were done during a different era. Ethiopia is in a different environment, a different historical space. But a lot of the things that they do, for example, I mentioned to you earlier, the state-led economic development model was used initially by South Korea, was used by China, by Singapore. A lot of these now very wealthy countries initially applied that, and then they said, you know what? After a short while, the state said, we're going to step back. Samsung, which was very, even though it was a private company, until it got its footing and then it became a global powerhouse.
Yeah.
That's the kind of model Ethiopia adopted. The first phases is what I said. Now we've gotten into the transition phase, which is now saying, you know what, the private sector needs to lead this. The state will come in, intervene when it's needed. When the private sector is unwilling or unable, the state will come and intervene. Otherwise, but obviously, it's going to be a collaborative effort. One is facilitating ease of doing business, making it easy for the private sector, especially the domestic private sector of Ethiopia, which is nascent, which is a teenager. 20 years ago, we didn't have a private sector. As you know, Ethiopia from the 1974, starting 1974, was a communist country, a pseudo-fascist country, which destroyed all private initiatives, including confiscating, nationalizing residential housing. So Ethiopia is actually, in many ways, its economy is being rebuilt in a rapid way.
All right.
And that's what
I'm
we
going to
see
come
today.
in there as a Medina.
So that's sort of, it's not a cut and paste.
Right. I'm coming in there because we've got another guest on this topic and we'd like to give him a chance to contribute. But we appreciate your insight. It's always valued, but we leave it there for now. Thanks again. Ethiopian businessman and economist is Medine Negatu. And we also continue then this conversation with Professor Peter Karungu of South Africa's Durban University of Technology.
Good morning, how are you?
Dr. Karungu,
Yeah.
Peter Ndoro here. So good to have you
How
on the
are you?
program. We're good. So, I mean, this Ethiopia story is being hailed as a positive one, and I can't help but think, when you see rapid expansion in terms of infrastructure, I think of Zambia because debt is also increasing at the same time, and inflation is a worry. So on the one hand, yes, it looks like a good story, but should we be worried about the way Ethiopia is going about it?
I think our guests kind of summarized most of the highlighted points, but the statistics sometimes don't lie. If you look at what happened in Ethiopia the last 20 years, I wouldn't say it's a miracle, but it's an effort of a population determined, one, to be able to build the base or the foundation of the growth that probably would turn the country in the next 30, 40 years. One of the beauty stories to be spoken. Look at it. Between 2004 and today, a GDP of 12 billion to almost 200 billion in 20 years is a good story. But two, if you look at even their per capita, given the high population, it's also growing in about 4 years, it's grown by 400 US dollars per capita. If you look at the infrastructure and the value add, in other words, the value add of what they do is critical to their growth. I have friends who visited Ethiopia not too long ago. And the story they are saying is they are doing a lot of what we call economic beneficiation, particularly in agriculture, and set up in the rural areas. Yes, the challenge of this is that if you don't control the macroeconomic factors, particularly managing the relationship between growth and inflation and generating demand that is driven by the masses rather than the few privileged rich, this story will be very interesting to tell.
I saw them reopen their stock exchange recently. Is that an indicator of the direction that they're going, that to have capital markets supporting their economy in this way?
If you look at it, the more you diversify the economy, the higher the likelihood of the stock exchange to thrive. In other words, they have moved from subsistence farming to value-added farming. They have moved from dependent on agriculture to diversify to manufacturing. If you look at the service industry, yes, the number of companies they will post on the stock market are numbers that are higher. The opportunities then become massive. Initially, they couldn't have done this because, like my colleague said earlier, they were highly dependent on agriculture. So I see a chance for them now to kick off with a successful stock market that could also drive the economy or increase or accelerate the rate to which they are turning it around. I think I must mention that they are also very good in long-term thinking. To look at the dam they are building, the Renaissance Dam, the new airport, they are projecting things in 20, 30 years. Countries like Kenya, the blueprint are there. The implementation doesn't exist. Therefore, you can be able to see a story that over time, maybe you and I will be saying, yes, we saw it coming.
The political environment always remains one of those variables, unfortunately, in a country like Ethiopia. But for as long as you have, and I think one of China's successes is consistency in the politics. Ethiopia has its own tensions. They're in the middle of a national dialogue to try and bring the country together, but it wasn't that long ago that we saw full-on civil war taking place in Ethiopia. Is this a worry, or if they're unable to maintain political stability, could all of this be washed away? I guess is the question I'm asking.
Yes, that is correct. Safe to say, most of civil war or most of the issues that lead to an element of disagreement among communities is not accessing the resources that they feel they deserve to have. But if you grow the economy and the cake grows and everybody is growing and they spread it across the country, nothing is as peacekeeper as the opportunities availing to everybody. In other words, I'm saying, in the event they tend to grow and the grid is managed and localizing the economy to an element of one tribe against the other causes this kind of stress in terms of all the way pushing to the civil war. I hope, and this is something that probably I'm sure they are working on, is to minimize the occurrence of disparity in income that always triggers that. That's one. Number two, I think over time and the technology and the people realizing, well, the Gen Zs of this world are the young people who are saying, we have had enough of strife among us. In Kenya, I see that. I see it in Nigeria. I saw it in Ghana. Not that is solid, but there is a chance that the youth of today are not going to repeat the mistake that have been done generation after generation. That's my prayer.
Talking about ordinary people on the ground, I think, as you said, statistics can tell a story, but not often the whole story. So you could say GDP per capita has grown, but that doesn't tell you about whether inequality has grown either, the Gini coefficient. And I wonder what the situation on the ground is in Ethiopia. Is the average Ethiopian's life improving with all of this progress the country is making?
I looked at the statistics of their agricultural industry. The answer is they have become literally a leading net exporter of food products. And more especially, they are putting a lot of effort in making sure that the rural areas are becoming part of the so to speak, of what we call the roaring or the wheel that is turning the economy. If they can empower the rural areas to the level that we are reading and put the right infrastructure, difficulty as it may be, it creates an element of the fastest change in per capita. In other words, the per capita income will be able to also effectively be seen to grow and also to curb the inequality that is overwhelming. Remember, like I said, when you move from subsistence to some element of industrialization, there is always that element of disparity that comes with the opportunistic approach by those who have in power. I think I was reading another article saying they are creating the fastest growing millionaires. I just hope they don't become another African country with the 20 billion or 4 billionaires, 20 millionaires, and 200 people or so who are living abject poverty. Those balances can only be addressed as you and I are talking for them to realize the only way out is to spread out the cake for majority to benefit. And I'm sure, I think they are smart enough to do that.
Or perhaps as a final question, so the story is looking good so far. Is there anything that you would encourage them to do, whether monetary reform, debt restructuring, anything that you might think would help them along this journey so that it's sustainable?
Of course, if you look at it, and the case need to be told, if you look at how they are financing the airport long term, Ethiopian Airlines is able to release $2.5 billion to inject into this. In other words, I'm seeing a country saying we need to grow and rely in a domestic economy rather than external borrowing. Debt is one of the worst options in trying to grow an economy and be able to get our people practice, because in the main, the donors or the funders require to get their money back with interest. I always say to government, try not to jump to somebody who is giving you the loan with this condition, because in the main, you can be able to manage domestic economy and grow without creating a debt to GDP ratio in the 80s. It cannot work like that. That's one. The second one is one thing that people need to be aware of is create literacy levels that each one of the citizens of any country can be able to read, can be able to make choices, can be able to understand that no matter how little you have, you break your money into what I need to spend, what I need to save, and what I need to keep for my children to be. It doesn't matter how little it is. In other words, we need to encourage savings at whatever level and whatever income. One can argue when you have very little, you have very little, but you can never make much.
Right.
by complaining, but you can only make much by finding how to save a little bit for the day that are coming.
Professor Karungu, we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately, but your insights always greatly appreciated on the program. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. That's Dr. Peter Karungu, academic and businessman, talking to us about the positive Ethiopian economic story. It's time for your news headlines. Here's Joelani Tulo Ngwebe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines. More than 30 people remain missing in Nigeria after a boat carrying 50 persons to a popular market in northwest Sokoto state capsized yesterday. The matter of the burial of former Zambian President Edgar Lungu is back in the Pretoria High Court in South Africa this morning after it stood down on Friday. And finally, U.S. President Donald Trump has insisted that Ukraine's leader Volodymyr Zelensky could end the war with Russia almost immediately if he chose to. I will have details on these and other stories at 9 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, it's time to find out what's happening in the world of sports. Here's Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
We bet off with the cricket news. The Proteas coach Shukri Conrad is pleased with the progress he's made his side despite losing the third and the final T20 international against Australia by 2 wickets and with 1 ball left. The result means the Proteas lost the series 2-1. Conrad has only been in the job for a couple of months as South Africa's white ball coach and says there's visible growth in the team in just a couple of series played. He did also note some cobwebs for some of his more experienced stars who did not play the Zimbabwe series.
Yeah, obviously disappointing, the result. A game we should have won going into the last over, so that result didn't go our way. But in and amongst all of that, I'm really happy with the growth. I'm happy with the progress that's being made. You can see the guys that have been playing, and you can see the guys that have come off a bit of a sabbatical. Just a little bit of rustiness and that. But to answer the question, yes, I'm happy with how we're shaping up.
The Proteas are now shifting their focus to the 50-over format starting on Tuesday. Deval Brevis and Conrad's admitted that the young star has probably cemented his place at next year's T20 World Cup and urged him not to change his style of play.
We've got, 14 T20s before the World Cup. So, yeah, all's good, and we'll keep building on that. I heard Aiden say now he's only 22. I hope he's obviously going to grow older, but I hope he continues to play like a 22-year-old. I think sometimes with experience, guys tend to adjust the way they play. But yeah, he's a breath of fresh air. He's probably he has nailed down that spot as he's going forward. And I'm sure he'll spur on guys in the side to take on things a bit earlier as well. But yeah, he's a special talent.
Let me end with the Mandela National Stadium will be buzzing tonight as Uganda and South Africa square off in the final Group C clash at the Total Energies African Nations Championship 2024. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Let's catch in with the world of business now as we say good morning to Nosipho Zuma.
Annika Longi sur Channel Africa.
Nous allons à présent dérouler notre tapis rouge pour accueillir notre personnalité du jour, l'artiste chanteur Sheky Frey qui est en ligne de Guinée avec nous.
Je suis un artiste guinéen, un créateur, un styliste et je fais un peu ce qui plaît à mes fans. Voilà, c'est un peu ça, on a beaucoup de genres de trucs à faire, mais bon, pour le moment on est basé un peu sur le rap.
D'accord. À quelle période de votre vie avez-vous commencé à vous intéresser à la musique, Sheky?
Bon, je crois pas qu'il y ait une période, parce que moi je suis un mélomane depuis mon petit âge.
Annika Longi, tous les dimanches sur Mix Vibration.
A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine. on Channel Africa. Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. In your business news this hour, the president of Botswana, Duma Boko, says there is an urgent need for African countries to trade with each other to avoid severe economic hits when foreign powers introduce new policies. He was speaking at the Southern African Development Community SADC Heads of State and Government Summit that took place in Madagascar on Sunday. His comments come at a time when exports from African countries have suddenly been hit with U.S. tariffs and richer nations have significantly reduced aid spending. Boko lamented what he referred to as trade mood swings.
We've seen how over-reliance on trade with certain powers of the world has rendered us so fatally vulnerable that we are now dependent on their mood swings. They determine what happens on the African continent.
The Democratic Alliance Party wants South Africa's Minister of Tourism, Patricia de Lille, to urgently account to Parliament following the precautionary suspension of South African Tourism CEO Nombulelo Guliwe. The party says de Lille's decision of attacking the boss decision will scapegoat Guliwe. De Lille says, according to legal advice, only the chairperson of the board can call a board meeting, and SA Tourism currently has no board chairperson. The DA's Hasina Ishmael.
Instead of focusing on the serious allegations against the CEO, the minister is fixated on whether the board had the authority to suspend her without a chairperson, a distraction that risks letting the CEO off the hook. However, it cannot be that the minister attacks the board while giving no attention to the serious allegations against the CEO.
De Lille spokesperson Aldrin St. Pierre says that the minister believes the board's resolution was unlawful.
The minister has written to the board members to get their reasons why they believe the board should not be dissolved. The submissions have now been received and the minister is currently looking at those. The minister will also be convening with the sector and to speak to them about some of the developments that have taken place at South Africa Tourism.
Uganda has inaugurated its first large-scale gold mine, a $250 million Chinese-owned project in the country's east that will also refine the bullion to 99.9% purity. The country, which has a variety of minerals, including copper, cobalt, and iron ore, wants to expand its mining industry and position itself as a major gold producer and exporter. Gold has already become Uganda's largest foreign exchange earner. And finally, Air Canada flight attendants are continuing their strike, defying a government order to return to work. The airline began suspending flights on Thursday last week after it reached an impasse with the union representing its cabin crew over what the union calls poverty wages and unpaid labor. On Wednesday, the union representing around 10,000 Air Canada flight attendants issued a 72-hour strike notice, resulting in a lockout notice issued by the airline. The BBC's Orlando Till has more.
Canada's government had used a contentious labour law to intervene in the strike action by Air Canada's cabin crew, arguing the disruption was too damaging to the national economy. But in an unusual step, the union has rejected this demand, calling the order blatantly unconstitutional. It said flight attendants were being forced to do hours of unpaid work, including assisting passengers prior to boarding. Plans by Air Canada to resume flights have now been pushed back to Monday evening. But with cabin crew refusing to return, it's unclear how these could be operated.
Your financial indicators: $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 531. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 249. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 355, and in Zambia, it's 23 kwacha 123. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 rupee 399. Russia is 82 rubles, so 2. India, it's 87 rupees 50. China, it's 7 yuan 18. And in South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 58. $1 is trading at 73 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,347 and platinum at $1,340 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $65.79 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nusi Pozuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
South Africa's Isimangaliso Wetland Park in the KwaZulu-Natal province, renowned for its exceptional biodiversity and ecotourism activities, has recently surprised the scientific community with an extraordinary kelp discovery that shines a light on the country's hidden marine treasures. During an exploratory survey aboard Wild Trust research vessel the Angra Pequena, there has been an unearthing of South Africa's hidden underwater forests of vital ecological importance within the park's mesophotic zone. That's the region of the ocean where sunlight barely penetrates. During the latest research survey aboard the vessel, a research team uncovered expansive fields of rhodoliths, free-living calcareous red algae that resemble pink-hued nodules scattered across the sea floor. We're now joined on the line by Dr. Vivienne Coetzee, postdoctoral fellow at the University of Cape Town, working under the Wild Oceans program. Dr. Coetzee, thanks for joining us. Always great having these catch-up learning sessions with you. How are you this Monday?
Good morning. Yes, doing well. Thank you for having me.
Well, let's start then with you explaining to us what this discovery means for Isimangaliso wetland and South Africa in general.
So as you've already stated, Isimangaliso is a beautiful biodiversity hotspot, and it is one of our biggest it is our biggest marine protected area in South Africa. And this is only the second ever rhodolith bed found in South Africa. The first one was in just off the Kai mouth in the Eastern Cape. So already this is significant for South Africa in general, but even more so for Isimangaliso, which is already a highlight for South Africa and a huge area of research interest.
This is the second, as you say, rhodolith bed that was ever documented in South African waters, the first being discovered off the Kai River, that's in the Eastern Cape province of the country. What is known about rhodolith, and is it easily discoverable?
So that's a great question. So up until a few years ago, I think if you asked a lot of scientists, no one would have really known what a rhodolith is. It's such an incredible find for us and new to most scientists, especially here in South Africa. These rhodoliths, they are documented worldwide, but with the first one only being discovered in 2017 in South Africa, we still have a lot to learn about them. But what we do know is they are unique. They basically provide building blocks for a greater ecosystem, increasing biodiversity, and are important nursery grounds for anything from our smaller invertebrates to our commercial lionfish species. So they are incredibly important for us to continue researching and understanding in the South African context, but looking at the global literature, they are teeming with life and very important to ocean health.
Let's talk about then, as you mentioned, that they are fragile, and we also know that they're slow in terms of producing or growing. So what are the threats to these rhodolith beds?
Yes, so these rhodoliths grow incredibly slowly. Some of them are said to be as old as dinosaurs. The ones in the Eastern Cape were found to be over 7,000 years old. So they take, as I said, a really long time to form, and threats such as trawling can destroy them within a couple months or years, these extensive rhodolith beds. And that recovery time it won't happen in our lifetime. So luckily for us, the two rhodolith beds found in South Africa both fall within marine protected areas. And in Isimangaliso, no trawling is allowed. So for us, that's not a threat for Isimangaliso's rhodolith bed, but global threats like climate change and ocean acidification, the borders of an MPA don't protect that. So these ecosystems are still definitely under threat to the more wide range threats that we experience in the ocean.
Typically, how does trawling occur? We imagine it's not the social media trolls that we are talking about here, but how would that happen?
So trawling is essentially when they drag fishing gear, you can think of it, along the ocean floor. So anything living on the ocean floor, whether it's rhodolith beds or soft corals, those all get dredged up and destroyed essentially. So you'll have these it's almost like a lawnmower going across the ocean floor.
Another threat is ocean acidification to rhodolith beds. How does that occur, and what needs to be done to prevent this disturbance?
So ocean acidification is quite a complex matter, I guess. But essentially, as our CO2 and temperatures around the world are increasing, the ocean is absorbing more carbon dioxide. And this is critical for things like rhodoliths, but also our coral reefs. And I don't know if our listeners or you have heard of coral bleaching, but that is the reason behind our coral bleaching that we experience. So unfortunately, the only thing we can do is try and get everyone to reduce as many fossil fuels as possible in terms of ocean acidification.
So with this research then, will this be in partnership then with other researchers on the same topic, and will it be shared with neighboring countries in terms of the preservation of their own ocean beds?
So yes, this project, which is run under the Wild Trust, it has a number of scientists working on it from all different universities and organizations across South Africa, and a few international ones. And it's a major project. Is been going for a few years now, which was obviously originally based on the kelp bed where these rhodoliths were originally discovered. But the amount of people involved in this research, it's definitely widespread. And it's, especially now with the added rhodoliths, it's going to put South Africa back on the map with another exciting find, especially in our beautiful Isimangaliso.
All right, so the KwaZulu-Natal province is covered as far as rhodolith beds, as well as the Eastern Cape. What are the chances that you could discover more in other provinces of the country?
So yes, this is what's so exciting, and it's why we need to focus more on discovering more what's hidden beneath our waves. It's obviously a very expensive exercise to keep discovering the ocean, but as we've now seen, it's very vital for us to keep discovering what's out there. I mean, like I said, up until 2017, we didn't know these rhodolith beds existed. And from what we see in the literature, they are incredibly important to our ocean health. And, a healthy ocean is a resilient ocean. And at the end of the day, the ocean is what secures our livelihoods.
Is enough effort and attention given to our underwater forests and ocean health, as you mentioned? And what needs to be done on that front in terms of education and more awareness?
There's definitely been an increase, for sure. South Africa has recently, or in 2019, expanded a whole number of our MPAs, and we are part of the 30 by 30, where we aim to have 30% of the ocean protected by 2030. And I think as this news gets out there and there's more coverage, awareness is definitely increasing. And Wild Trust do an incredible job at spreading awareness through local communities, through social media. So I'd highly recommend our listeners follow them on their socials, which is Wild Oceans SA, and just keep spreading awareness, because it is incredibly important for people to understand how these ecosystems affect us. It's, everyone knows how important a rainforest is, but no one knows how important these kelp or rhodolith ecosystems are.
So after this research, then what's next for the Isimangaliso Wetland Park, and especially on their biodiversity efforts and ecotourism activities?
So this project is still ongoing. So as I mentioned, it originally began to focus on the kelp bed that was documented a couple years ago. So the research it's a huge research topic, trying to figure out the extent of the kelp bed, why it's there, what biodiversity it supports, and now with this added rhodolith discovery, it's just going to piggyback onto that, and we're going to, learn more about the rhodoliths in this area, because, like I said, we know in a global context, but we still have so much to learn about it for Isimangaliso. And ecotourism, well, it's already a great place to go to, especially for our divers and recreational fishers. But this kelp bed is quite deep. It's between 30 and 70 meters. So in that aspect, I don't think we will improve ecotourism to go and see these rhodoliths, but all of these ecosystems benefit the biodiversity of the greater area, which is obviously a great tourist attraction.
Just finally, Doctor, before we let you go, because our introduction was filled with a lot of scientific terminology that we need to break down, we won't understand everything. But we also talk about the importance of the park's mesophotic zone, and we explain it as a region of the ocean where sunlight barely penetrates. Is that a challenge in terms of these zones? And what typically would be a way of preserving them, and why sunlight doesn't penetrate in those particular zones?
Okay, so yes, the mesophotic zone refers to it's sort of the depth gradient where light doesn't penetrate as deeply. So it's between 30 and 150 meters, and obviously the further down you go, the less light there is. So as you asked earlier, will we be discovering more of these? And up until a couple years ago, we didn't have the technology to explore these deeper regions. But we've had great technological advancements. We now have these ROVs, which are like a drone that we can send down, and that allows us to explore these areas. So, as technology improves, we are going to continue to learn more about these mesophotic zones, because, like you said, they were previously inaccessible for us to go and study. So yes, they are still a challenge to research and document, but it is getting better every day as we develop more technology.
Dr. Kutsia, we appreciate your time again, and for joining us here on Rise and Shine, we thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Vivian Kutsia is postdoctoral fellow at the University of Cape Town, working under the Wild Oceans program. So they've made an extraordinary kelp discovery there in the KwaZulu-Natal province of the rhodolith beds that were previously discovered in the Kai River area of the Eastern Cape. So all about biodiversity and ecotourism activities, but most importantly, taking care of our environment and ensuring that there is ocean health no matter what. Coming up after Rise and Shine is On the Move with Benjamin Mushatama and Pale Satao. Benjamin joining us now to tell us what to expect on this Monday, the 18th of August. It's a new day.
Really smart today. Hey?
Smart. Yeah.
It's
no,
like
but he's
the
got
smart
those days.
casual.
This one.
Yeah.
You were surprised.
How are the other days? I'm more worried about those days. Yeah, it's a bit weird when people say this now and then. It's like, okay, how are the other days? All right. Anyway, okay, let's talk a little bit about what's coming up on the show. We're going to be having a GBV focus, right? And our GBV focus today is going to be looking at harmful gender norms that can actually create that GBV environment. So we'll be talking a little bit about those because there's so many.
An example, because I'm hearing you and I'm trying to think what they could
I think
be.
generally they are harmful. I think the fact that there's a gender stereotype means there's harm, because it perpetuates then the belief of, when somebody feels like they've got ownership over another human being.
Okay, so lobola could be one of those.
It could be. I think they generally are very skating on a thin layer when it comes to them being toxic or problematic.
Yeah, female genital mutilation, child marriage, silencing of survivors of rape, domestic abuse. So there's so many, Peter.
And what is that one where they snatch you when you're walking and they grab you and you become a wife to someone?
What is that?
I'm not quite sure.
When your family would have...
like a child bride.
Ukutwala.
Oh, Ukutwala.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, no, the way you described it
also got lost.
Dramatic.
Because that's a norm that could be problematic.
Yeah, it is problematic. Yeah. It's not could be.
In the sense that it can contribute to GBV eventually. Because
it does contribute to GBV. Yeah.
Even the division of labor within the home, that the boy must do this, take the bin out, the girl must wash the dishes. Those stereotypes can be harmful.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
We've got our gender-based violence section tomorrow.
Oh, nice. What are you guys talking about? Do you know?
Not yet. We don't know.
Okay, cool. Let's keep it going, guys. It's an important one.
Yeah. No, it is very, very important, man. Gosh, wow. So that's On the Move coming up with Benjamin and Palesa right here on Channel Africa, where we bring you the African perspective. All right, and that's how we come to the end of today's edition of Rise and Shine right here on Channel Africa, where we bring you the African perspective. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Let's do it again tomorrow, bright and early, 6 a.m. Central Africa time.